In the shadowy corners of myth and legend, where the line between reality and nightmare begins to blur, terrifying creatures have stalked the imaginations of people for centuries. These are not your average fairy tale monsters. These are the ancient predators whispered about around fires, feared in the dark and blamed for things that go bump in the night. From the frozen wilderness to scorching deserts, every culture has birthed its own horrors, some with fangs and claws, others with more insidious supernatural forms. But what if these monsters were more than just stories? In this video, we're diving deep into the world of deadly folklore creatures, beings so fearsome and mysterious they've endured across generations. Some are harbingers of death, others feed on human fear or flesh, but all of them reflect something deeper: the fears, values, and warnings of the cultures that created them. Whether you're a lover of the macabre or a seeker of ancient mysteries, prepare yourself. These are the most dangerous and spine-chilling creatures to ever crawl out of the pages of folklore. And once you learn their stories, you might think twice the next time you hear a noise in the dark. In the shadowy depths of Eastern European forests, where ancient trees whisper secrets and the wind carries tales of old, there exists a figure both feared and revered, a being whose very name conjures images of mystery, magic, and menace. This is the realm of Baba Yaga, the enigmatic witch of Slavic folklore. Baba Yaga is a prominent figure in Slavic folklore, particularly within East Slavic countries such as Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. Her tales have been passed down through generations, each iteration adding layers to her complex persona. She is often depicted as an old woman with a fearsome appearance, embodying the dual nature of a maternal figure and a malevolent villain. The origins of Baba Yaga are deeply rooted in Slavic mythology. Some scholars suggest that she may have evolved from ancient deities associated with nature, fertility, and the cycles of life and death. Over time, as pagan beliefs intertwined with emerging cultural narratives, Baba Yaga's character transformed into the multifaceted figure known today. The first known written references to Baba Yaga appear in the 18th century, most notably in collections of Russian folktales compiled by scholars such as Alexander Afanasyev in the mid-1800s. Russian folktales helped preserve and standardize many versions of Baba Yaga stories, though the tales themselves had been passed down orally for centuries, shaped and reshaped by each storyteller. Over time, as Christianity spread throughout Eastern Europe, Baba Yaga was reinterpreted through a new lens. Once possibly revered as a nature goddess or ancestral spirit, she was gradually recast as a witch-like figure, fearsome, wicked, and dwelling on the margins of society. Yet traces of her divine past remained: her control over life and death, her wisdom of the natural world, and her ambiguous morality all suggest an origin far older than the witch archetype she later embodied. Baba Yaga's physical description is as intriguing as her origins. She is often portrayed as an old, emaciated woman with a hideous appearance. Her nose is so long that it touches the ceiling when she sleeps, and her teeth are made of iron, capable of tearing through flesh and bone. In some tales, she is described as having one normal leg and one leg made of bone, symbolizing her connection to both the living and the dead. One of the most distinctive aspects of Baba Yaga is her dwelling, a hut perched atop giant chicken legs. This peculiar abode is said to rotate or move through the forest, making it difficult for unwanted visitors to find or access. The hut is often surrounded by a fence made of human bones, with skulls atop the posts, serving as a grim warning to those who might approach. To enter the hut, one must recite a specific incantation, prompting the hut to turn and present its door. The hut itself is a powerful symbol of Baba Yaga's connection to the natural world. Rooted deep within the forest, it reflects her dominion over the wild and untamed. Its legs, sometimes described as bird-like or resembling tree stumps, suggest that it is a living extension of the woods, ever moving, ever watching. The fence of bones marks the boundary between the human world and the primal domain she inhabits. Baba Yaga's transportation is as unconventional as her home. She is said to travel through the air in a mortar, using a pestle to propel herself and a broom to sweep away her tracks, leaving no trace of her passage. This mode of travel underscores her connection to the mystical and the unknown, further enhancing her enigmatic presence in folklore. The mortar and pestle, traditionally tools used for grinding herbs and natural ingredients, hint at her deep knowledge of plants and potions, a nature-bound witch rooted in earth-based practices. The character of Baba Yaga is marked by duality. In many stories, she is portrayed as a malevolent figure who abducts and eats children, embodying the role of a fearsome witch. Yet, in other tales, she serves as a wise old woman who offers guidance, assistance, or magical gifts to those who seek her out and meet her challenges. This ambiguity makes her a complex symbol, representing both the dangers and the wisdom that can be found in the unknown. Numerous tales feature Baba Yaga, each highlighting different facets of her character. In the story of Vasilisa the Beautiful, Baba Yaga plays the role of both antagonist and catalyst. Vasilisa, a young girl tormented by her wicked stepmother and stepsisters, is sent into the forest to fetch light from Baba Yaga's hut. Despite the perilous nature of the task, Vasilisa's kindness, humility, and the aid of a magical doll given to her by her late mother enable her to navigate Baba Yaga's challenges successfully. Impressed by Vasilisa's diligence, Baba Yaga grants her the light she seeks, which ultimately leads to the demise of her cruel stepfamily. In another tale, Baba Yaga is depicted as a guardian of the water of life and death, a magical substance sought by heroes to achieve their quests. Accessing this water requires the hero to demonstrate courage, wit, and purity of heart, reflecting the recurring theme of transformation through trials. Baba Yaga's role in folklore serves multiple symbolic purposes. She embodies the unpredictable forces of nature, both nurturing and destructive. Her association with the forest, a place of both danger and discovery, positions her as a liminal figure who exists between the realms of civilization and the wild. This duality reflects the human experience of confronting the unknown, where fear and wisdom often intertwine. She is often seen as a personification of the forest itself, its beauty, its menace, and its mystery. Like the forest, Baba Yaga can provide shelter or spell doom. She knows the language of the trees, the secrets of roots and herbs, and the rhythms of the natural world. In some interpretations, she is even viewed as a guardian of the balance between life and death, growth and decay. Her presence reminds us of our dependence on and fear of the natural world, its ability to nurture or destroy. Moreover, Baba Yaga's character can be interpreted as a representation of the archetypal crone, a figure symbolizing the wisdom that comes with age and the inevitability of death. In this context, her actions challenge individuals to confront their own fears, limitations, and desires, ultimately leading to personal growth or demise. The enduring appeal of Baba Yaga in modern culture is evident in her continued presence in literature, art, and media. She has inspired numerous adaptations and reinterpretations, reflecting society's ongoing fascination with her enigmatic nature. From novels and films to operas and ballets, Baba Yaga's legacy persists, serving as a testament to the timeless power of folklore to explore the complexities of the human condition. In contemporary discussions, Baba Yaga has been analyzed through various lenses, including feminist theory, which examines her role as a powerful, autonomous female figure who defies conventional norms. This perspective highlights the subversive potential of her character, challenging traditional narratives about gender and authority. The tales of Baba Yaga offer rich insights into the cultural and psychological landscapes of the societies from which they emerged. They serve as reminders of the thin veil between the familiar and the unknown, the civilized and the wild, and the profound lessons that can be learned when one dares to venture into the depths of the forest. From the dark forests of Baba Yaga, we head to the misty Scottish Lochs, home to an even deadlier creature of myth. They say the water looks calm until it's too late. The still, glassy surface hides something ancient and hungry, something that watches from just below the ripples. A flash of silver mane, the shimmer of dark eyes, a gentle whinny drifting across the moor. That's all the warning you get. In the mist-covered lochs of Scotland, where fog curls over the water like fingers and silence carries an edge, the Kelpie waits. To understand the Kelpie is to step into the heart of Scottish folklore, where the wild landscape and ancient beliefs intertwine. The Kelpie is a shape-shifting water spirit said to inhabit the lochs and rivers of Scotland. Its most iconic form is that of a beautiful black horse, sleek and powerful, often seen grazing near the water's edge. But that beauty is a trap. Because once a person touches the Kelpie's hide, usually a child, lured by its inviting appearance, they find themselves stuck, bound to the creature by supernatural force. And the moment they climb upon its back, the Kelpie charges into the water, dragging its victim to a watery grave. The earliest references to the Kelpie appear in Scottish oral traditions, particularly in the Highlands, though written records began surfacing in the 18th and 19th centuries, as folklore was collected by antiquarians. Its name likely comes from the Scottish Gaelic colpac, meaning heifer or colt, connecting the creature directly to its equine disguise. But unlike a mere legend to entertain children, the Kelpie myth carried real weight in communities that lived in constant proximity to dangerous waters. It was more than a story, it was a warning. Scotland's landscape is one of stark, untamed beauty. Lochs stretch out in the valleys like dark mirrors, reflecting the hills and skies, but they are cold, deep, and unforgiving. Drownings were not uncommon in rural areas, especially among children. The Kelpie myth gave these communities a way to explain such tragedies, to personify the peril lurking beneath the surface. Parents would warn their children, "Don't play near the loch alone, don't follow the pretty horse. The Kelpie might get you." But this creature is far more complex than just a supernatural horse. In some stories, the Kelpie can shed its skin and assume human form, appearing as a tall, dark man with wild hair and an intense gaze. Even in human shape, it often carries a tell, water weeds tangled in its hair, a dampness to its clothes, an unsettling gleam in the eye. In these tales, the Kelpie is a seducer, especially of young women, luring them to the water with charm and mystery. Again, the result is the same. The river claims them. What sets the Kelpie apart from other folkloric creatures is this shape-shifting duality. It is both beast and man, beautiful and deadly. This ability to transform adds a layer of psychological fear to its legend. If it can look like one of us, if it can walk among us unnoticed, how can we know when danger is near? In some regions, particularly around Loch Ness, the Kelpie was thought to be a cousin of sorts to the more famous Loch Ness monster. Some believed they were one and the same, and while Nessie became a cultural phenomenon wrapped in mystery and modern speculation, the Kelpie remains something older, darker, and more intimate. It lived in stories whispered by firelight and carried a moral weight. It wasn't just about the danger of water, it was about the danger of desire, deception, and stepping beyond safe boundaries. Interestingly, not all Kelpie stories end in tragedy. Some speak of people clever or brave enough to outwit the creature. In these tales, a person might steal the Kelpie's bridle or halter, often described as silver or enchanted, and by doing so gain control over the beast. In one version, a blacksmith captures a Kelpie and forces it into servitude, using its supernatural strength to complete impossible tasks. Another tale tells of a woman who sees through a Kelpie's disguise and escapes before it can pull her into the water. These variations suggest that while the Kelpie is a fearsome presence, it is not invincible. Knowledge, wit, and courage can sometimes prevail. The Kelpie also occupies a curious space in the pantheon of mythological creatures. It shares traits with water spirits found in other cultures, such as the Scandinavian Neki, the Germanic Nixie, or the Slavic Rusalka. All are linked by themes of seduction, transformation, and watery doom. But the Kelpie is uniquely Scottish in flavor, shaped by the land, language, and culture of its people. Its equine form may stem from the importance of horses in Celtic traditions, where they were revered as symbols of power and otherworldly connection. In the modern era, the Kelpie has not faded into obscurity. If anything, it has experienced a resurgence. The most striking tribute stands in Falkirk, Scotland, where two massive 30-meter-tall horsehead sculptures known as the Kelpies loom over the landscape. These colossal structures celebrate the myth while also honoring the role of horses in Scottish history. But even in this modern interpretation, the mythic undertone remains. Tourists marvel at the artistry, but some still whisper of the legend, the dark thing in the water. Contemporary fiction and media have also embraced the Kelpie. It has appeared in novels, television series, and fantasy games, often reimagined with varying degrees of faithfulness to the original lore. Yet, while the creature might now wear different skins, a sleek, stylish villain in one story, a tragic anti-hero in another, the core idea remains potent. The Kelpie represents what lies beneath, what we fail to see until it's too late. It's the unknown depth of the familiar. Critically, the Kelpie also offers insight into the psychology of folklore. It's not just about water spirits or ancient superstitions. It's about how people process danger, especially in a world where nature could be both life-giving and merciless. The Kelpie was a way to embody fear, to give shape to a force that couldn't be controlled. And by telling stories about it, people could teach lessons, enforce taboos, and maybe even exert a sense of control over the uncontrollable. Even now, there is something timeless about the Kelpie. We live in an age of information, satellites, and science, but step beside a quiet loch at dusk, and the world still feels old. The mist still curls like breath from another world. The water still waits, cold and endless. And just for a moment, you might hear the soft sound of hooves on the shoreline and wonder. Because the Kelpie hasn't disappeared, it has simply evolved. Today it might not be a literal horse waiting to drown the unwary, but the story lives on as a metaphor for the dangers that hide behind beauty, the risks of unchecked temptation, and the thin, fragile line between safety and peril. Like all great myths, it remains because it speaks to something real. So if you ever find yourself wandering the highlands of Scotland, and you see a lone horse by the edge of the water, think twice before you get too close. Because some stories are more than stories, some creatures never truly vanish, and the Kelpie still waits. From the watery lure of the Kelpie, we move to the desolate moors of England, where a shadow with burning eyes haunts the night. In the wind-swept fenlands and moonlit coasts of East Anglia, where the mist curls thick around the twisted trees and the wind sings through empty fields, there is a tale older than the roads that cut through the countryside. It is whispered by those who still tend the land, and feared by those who know the weight of ancient things. The story speaks of a beast with eyes like burning coals and a coat as black as a starless night, a creature of omen and shadow, seen only when death walks close behind. This is the legend of Black Shuck, the ghost hound of the English wilds. The tale of Black Shuck belongs to the folklore of Norfolk and Suffolk, where it has haunted lonely lanes and coastal paths for centuries. Descriptions vary, but most agree on the essentials: a massive black dog, larger than a man, with matted fur and glowing red, or sometimes green eyes. Some say it pads silently beside you, while others claim its footfalls shake the earth. In all versions, one truth remains constant: to see Black Shuck is to brush against death. Yet the beast is more than a spectral hound. It is a piece of cultural memory, an echo of old fears, old roads, and the darkness between the hedgerows. Unlike many folkloric monsters, Black Shuck does not always attack. Often it simply appears, watches, and fades away. It is an omen, a shadow cast just ahead of fate. One of the most enduring stories dates back to August 4th, 1577. On that storm-racked Sunday, as lightning split the sky over Blythburgh Church in Suffolk, Black Shuck is said to have burst through the heavy doors during morning service. Witnesses claimed the beast tore down the aisle, killing 2 parishioners and scorching the stone walls with its claws, before vanishing in a thunderclap. The claw marks remain visible to this day, burned into the wood of the church door, a testament to something dark that came howling from the storm. But Black Shuck is not limited to one tale or one town. Variants of the legend stretch across East Anglia and beyond, in Bungay, in Leiston, even in the shadowy forests of Thetford. People tell of a great black dog seen walking beside lonely travelers or appearing in graveyards and crossroads. The sightings often come before tragedy: a lost child, a failed harvest, a sudden illness. Yet curiously, not all stories end in doom. Some recount a softer side to the beast. In certain villages, Shuck is seen not as a killer, but as a silent guardian. There are tales of women escorted safely home on dark nights, protected from would-be attackers by a hulking shape in the shadows. In others, soldiers claim to see the dog before battle, not as a curse, but as a companion, an embodiment of fate walking at their side. Folklorists have long debated the origin of the Black Shuck legend. Some tie it to the broader tradition of the black dog archetype, which appears throughout Britain in forms like the Barghest of Yorkshire or the Gwilgie of Wales. Others believe it may descend from older Norse myths brought by Viking settlers, particularly the monstrous wolf Fenrir, whose presence heralds the end of days. Linguistically, the name Shuck may derive from the Old English skukka, meaning demon or fiend. But beyond etymology and archetypes, Black Shuck has a deeper resonance. It exists at the edge of life and death, of the wild and the settled. In this way, Shuck acts as a kind of psychopomp, a guide of souls, a silent witness to the moment when one world gives way to the next. This interpretation softens the creature's menace. It is not evil, but necessary. Not cruel, but inevitable. Some modern interpretations go further, seeing Black Shuck not as a literal being, but a manifestation of psychological dread. In a landscape shaped by isolation, poverty, and war, the figure of the black dog becomes a projection of communal trauma. During the World Wars, soldiers from East Anglia reported seeing Shuck before deployment or after losing comrades. In these stories, the dog does not growl or chase. It simply is, a presence too vast and ancient to explain. There is also the darker side of symbolism. In English folklore and literature, the black dog has often been associated with depression, what Winston Churchill famously called his black dog. This emotional resonance lingers in the legend. When people speak of Shuck today, they sometimes do so in hushed tones, not because they fear being mauled, but because they fear being seen by something that knows their grief. Even the terrain itself seems shaped by the legend. Certain trails in Norfolk and Suffolk are still called Shuck's Lanes, and there are aged stone markers known as Shuck stones said to be places where the beast was last seen. People make the sign of the cross when passing these places, or leave small offerings, tokens of respect to the thing that watches from the hedgerows. The duality of the Black Shuck legend is what makes it endure. It is not a beast of good or evil, but of balance. It is the thing that walks beside you when you're lost, the shadow behind joy, the howl on the night wind, that reminds you the world is vast and unknowable. Shuck is grief and fear, and the quiet strength that comes from facing the dark and walking forward anyway. And so the story lives on, in the bark of a distant dog when the night is still, in the eyes of a stray watching from the fields, in the silence that follows your footsteps on an empty road. To see Black Shuck is not always to die, but it is to be seen, truly seen, by something older than memory. If you walk the coast of East Anglia on a stormy night, and the wind grows quiet, and you feel the prickle of unseen eyes, take heed, you may not be alone. And if a shape appears beside you, massive and silent, its breath cold and its eyes like embers, do not run. Do not scream. Walk on, for Black Shuck walks with those who carry something heavy, and he does not always come to take. Sometimes he simply comes to remind you that you are not the only one who walks in darkness. But not all headlong terror rides on four legs. Some come on horseback, without a head at all. In the rolling green hills and mist-draped forests of Ireland, where ancient stone walls meander through the countryside and forgotten ruins linger in silence, a tale rides on the wind. It is whispered in village pubs, spoken cautiously by candlelight, and passed down from grandmother to grandchild. This is the story of a creature that brings with it a paralyzing dread, a being from the shadowy edge of Irish folklore. It is the tale of the Dullahan, the headless horseman of Celtic myth. The Dullahan is not a spirit to be trifled with, nor is it a mere ghost. It is a harbinger of death, a supernatural entity that rides forth when the veil between life and death grows thin. Said to travel the lonely country roads on moonless nights, the Dullahan is most often depicted as a headless rider seated upon a black steed, its hooves striking sparks from the ground as it gallops. In one hand, the Dullahan holds a whip made from a human spine. In the other, it carries its own head, a grotesque object, with skin the color and texture of moldy cheese, eyes that dart about like restless flies, and a mouth twisted into a macabre grin. The head, though severed, is not lifeless. It sees, it speaks, and it glows with an unholy light, allowing the Dullahan to navigate the darkest paths. It is said that when the Dullahan speaks a name aloud, that person dies instantly. No door, no wall, no barrier can keep it out. Locks fall open, bolts slide free. The Dullahan comes and goes as it pleases, and none can stop it. Much like the Banshee, the Dullahan is a death omen, but it differs in both form and function. While the Banshee wails to forewarn a passing, the Dullahan arrives to collect. It does not mourn. It does not linger. It simply comes for the soul that has reached its time. In some tales, it rides a carriage pulled by 6 black horses, each one headless, their speed so great they set the roads aflame. The wheels of the coach are made from human thigh bones, the covering stretched from flayed human skin. When this hellish procession approaches, people scatter, for to witness the Dullahan is to risk death. But not all who see it die. Some merely go blind in one eye, a consequence of crossing the Dullahan's path, or being splashed by the contents of its basin, a bowl of blood used to mark the one who is next. Others speak of being paralyzed by its gaze, left rooted to the ground as the horseman passes. In a strange twist of vulnerability, the Dullahan has one known weakness. It fears gold. Even a small piece, a coin, a ring, can drive it away. Why this is remains unknown, but it has persisted in folklore, perhaps as a sliver of hope for those who dare to walk the roads at night. The origin of the Dullahan myth stretches deep into pre-Christian Irish tradition, where the figure is often linked with the ancient Celtic god Crom Duba. This deity, whose name translates to Dark Crooked One, demanded blood sacrifice in exchange for good harvests. When Christianity spread through Ireland and such practices were outlawed, Crom Duba's bloody rituals were demonized, and over time he may have been transformed into the headless rider, forever seeking lives to balance a cosmic debt. The tale of the Dullahan, like many pieces of folklore, served a dual purpose: to explain the unexplainable, and to warn. Death, sudden and unexplained, was a part of daily life in rural Ireland. The image of a headless rider, choosing victims at random, gave form to the chaos of mortality. In communities bound by oral tradition, stories like this one helped people process fear, caution children, and forge a shared identity in the face of the unknown. Unlike many legendary figures, the Dullahan is almost entirely devoid of humanity. There is no tragic backstory of betrayal or loss, no misunderstood motives. It is death incarnate, inevitable, remorseless, and swift. And yet, it fascinates. In some interpretations, the Dullahan is a symbolic bridge between old pagan beliefs and the encroaching Christian theology, a relic of a world where gods rode among mortals and fate was sealed by ritual. The Dullahan appears in various regional variants. In County Down, it is said to ride a headless horse as well, the two of them together a more terrifying sight. In other counties, it is accompanied by ghostly attendants who carry candles and skull lanterns, casting long, flickering shadows down the narrow roads. Some accounts describe the Dullahan speaking not just the name of the dead, but muttering curses in a dead language that curdle the blood. In literature and popular culture, the Dullahan has surfaced again and again. It is often confused or conflated with the more widely known Headless Horseman from Washington Irving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, though the Dullahan predates that tale by centuries. Where Irving's horseman is a ghost seeking its lost head, the Dullahan is an embodiment of death itself. It does not seek, it declares. Modern sightings or stories of the Dullahan have waned, but the legend still thrives in the Irish imagination. During certain festivals or ghost walks, the tale is revived, and golden trinkets are sometimes sold as charms against the rider's wrath. In rural areas, some still leave small offerings or light lanterns by the roadside, perhaps more out of tradition than belief, but always with a hint of unease. In recent years, the Dullahan has also become a potent symbol in literature, film, and psychological studies as an embodiment of death's inevitability and the fear of the unknown. Where once it served to frighten villagers into respecting burial rites and staying indoors after dark, today the Dullahan is often interpreted as a metaphor for suppressed grief or societal unease around mortality. Its silent, relentless pursuit mirrors the way death arrives, without mercy, without exception. Some folklorists even suggest that the Dullahan's headless form is a powerful image of disconnection from self, from spirit, from history. In this way, the Dullahan lives on not just as a horror, but as a reflection of how we confront or fail to confront what lies beyond the veil. The Dullahan's lasting power comes from its simplicity and its starkness. In a world full of nuance and gray morality, it represents something absolute. Its image, The head in one hand, the spine whip in the other, the pounding of hooves in the dark is one that lingers in the mind. It warns of a time when death was a mystery, and the world was still full of roads best not traveled alone. So the story endures, riding alongside the mist in the early hours, woven into the grass and stone of Ireland. Should you ever find yourself walking a country lane beneath a moonless sky, and feel the air grow suddenly cold, or hear the echo of hooves where there should be none, do not look back, do not speak, and for your own sake, make sure to carry a coin of gold in your pocket. For on nights such as these, the Dullahan rides again. As the sound of hooves fades into the mist, another presence emerges. They say it begins with hunger, not the kind that gnaws at you after missing a meal, but the kind that empties out your soul. The kind of hunger born in the dead of winter, when the wind screams through frozen trees and the snow piles high enough to bury the world. A hunger so consuming, so desperate, that it twists the human spirit into something else entirely. That's when the Wendigo comes. In the dense snow-covered forests of the northern Great Lakes and into the deep wilderness of Canada, legends of the Wendigo have been whispered for generations, passed down through Algonquian-speaking tribes such as the Cree, the Ojibwe, and the Innu. The Wendigo is more than a monster, it is a cautionary tale, a spirit of hunger, greed, and unrelenting cold. To these First Nations, it is not just a creature, but a reflection of something terrifyingly human. The earliest stories describe the Wendigo as a towering figure, emaciated and skeletal, its skin stretched thin over bone, its eyes sunken deep into its skull. Some say it stands over 15 feet tall, others describe it with matted fur and a heart of ice. In some tales, it has antlers like a deer, in others, a mouth too wide, filled with jagged, broken teeth. But what unites all versions is the horror at its core. The Wendigo was once human, a person who, out of starvation or madness, committed the ultimate taboo, cannibalism. In doing so, they were cursed, transformed, forever consumed by a hunger that would never be satisfied. The myth was not just a boogeyman tale told to scare children. It was a deeply embedded part of cultural law and spiritual belief. In isolated winters, when food was scarce and communities were trapped by snow, people were taught to beware the Wendigo spirit. Not just the creature itself, but the creeping temptation that could turn one of their own into something monstrous. It was, in a way, a psychological guardrail, a supernatural punishment for selfishness, greed, and the ultimate betrayal of kin. Some tribes believed the Wendigo could possess the living, driving them mad with hunger and turning them against their own. Others told of sightings in the trees, a shadow too tall to be a man, eyes glowing in the darkness. Elders told stories of how it would mimic the voices of loved ones, luring people deeper into the woods. Once you heard it, it was already too late. But these weren't just old myths to be dismissed as superstition. In the 1800s and early 1900s, there were real reports of Wendigo sightings. Men claimed to have seen tall, skeletal creatures stalking the forests during hard winters. There were even cases where members of indigenous communities were accused of being possessed by the Wendigo spirit. One of the most infamous was the case of Swift Runner, a Cree trapper who during the winter of 1878 murdered and consumed his entire family. When brought to justice, he claimed he had been overcome by a Wendigo spirit. He was tried and executed, but his story echoed through the land proof. Some said that the Wendigo was real. Western scholars later tried to explain these legends through the lens of psychology. Some called it a culture-bound syndrome. Wendigo psychosis, a condition where individuals believed they were turning into a cannibalistic creature. The diagnosis is controversial and rare, but the very fact that modern medicine had to find a name for it speaks to how deeply embedded this myth is in the cultural psyche. And then there's the land itself. The regions where the Wendigo is said to dwell are some of the most remote and unforgiving landscapes in North America. Towering pines, endless snow, and a silence so complete it presses on your ears. There's something about the cold that sharpens fear. Out there, it isn't hard to believe that something ancient could still be watching, waiting, hungering. What makes the Wendigo so terrifying isn't just what it looks like or what it does, it's what it represents. The monster is not an invader from the outside world. It's not a demon or a beast from another realm. It is human weakness turned inside out. It is the horror of what we might become when survival is no longer certain. It is what lurks beneath the surface when morality, community, and compassion are stripped away. This makes the Wendigo very different from other mythical monsters and cryptids, where many creatures in folklore, like werewolves, vampires, or demons, come from outside, infecting or attacking humanity. The Wendigo is what you become. It's not a curse cast upon you by a witch, or a punishment from the gods. It's the end result of losing yourself to desperation and desire. While werewolves transform under a full moon, the Wendigo transforms through choice or surrender. It's a mirror, not a mask. Even other man-eating creatures, like the Ghoul of Middle Eastern legend or the Rakshasa from Hindu mythology, are usually portrayed as supernatural beings from the start. The Wendigo is unique in that it begins as a human, corrupted by the ultimate betrayal of community, eating another person not out of necessity, but greed, and that distinction matters. Because the Wendigo isn't about survival at any cost, it's about what happens when even the memory of morality disappears. That kind of transformation, slow and internal, is far more chilling than anything fanged or clawed. Over time, the Wendigo myth has evolved. Pop culture has taken hold of it, as it often does with ancient stories, and reshaped it into something flashy and cinematic. You'll find it in horror games, TV series, and novels, usually portrayed as a terrifying forest monster, part deer, part corpse. The eerie elegance of its form, the haunting emptiness in its eyes, has captivated modern audiences. But these portrayals often miss the deeper truth of the Wendigo. They show the monster but forget the warning. Today, the Wendigo has become something of an icon for mystery lovers and horror fans. Urban explorers share alleged sightings online, complete with blurry photos and bone-chilling sound recordings. Paranormal forums speculate about strange disappearances in the northern woods. The line between folklore and modern myth blending continues to blur. But if you speak to the elders in communities that still carry the old stories, they'll remind you that the Wendigo isn't a joke. It isn't entertainment. It is a reminder, carved into the bones of winter, that the greatest danger to any people comes from within. That when we forget to care for one another, when we hoard, betray, or give in to our darkest impulses, the Wendigo is waiting. Not in the shadows of the trees, but in the recesses of the soul. And perhaps that's why the legend still resonates today. Because even in a modern world filled with technology and convenience, we are never far from disaster. A storm can knock out power. A pandemic can isolate us. Economic collapse, war, famine. Our veneer of control is thinner than we like to believe. And in those moments, when desperation whispers in the dark, the old stories return. The Wendigo stirs. So the next time you hear the wind howling through the trees on a bitter winter night, remember the legends, not just for the fear they conjure, but for the wisdom they contain. The Wendigo teaches us that the line between man and monster is thinner than we think, that hunger, left unchecked, can consume more than just the body. It can consume the soul. But while the cold northern forests birthed one kind of hunger, across the sea, another took shape, raw, relentless, and reeking of the sea's decay. In the windswept reaches of the Orkney Islands, where the sea crashes against jagged cliffs and the sky broods with eternal gray, there is a tale whispered through generations. It speaks of a creature so vile, so horrific, that even the most hardened fishermen dare not speak its name aloud. Born of storm and shadow, it is said to haunt the border between land and sea, bringing with it plague, famine, and death. This is the legend of the Nuckelavee, the skinless nightmare of the north. The Nuckelavee is a creature of Orcadian folklore, with origins that trace back to a blend of Norse and Celtic mythology. Unlike many mythological beings, which are often marked by moral ambiguity or hidden wisdom, the Nuckelavee is a rare example of unrelenting evil. It is a monster in every sense, a fusion of horse and man, twisted together in a grotesque parody of life. The creature is described as having the body of a massive horse, but from where the horse's neck would be, a human-like torso emerges. This upper body is humanoid in form, but terrifying in detail, grotesquely large, with elongated arms that nearly drag along the ground, and a head far too massive for its shoulders, lolling unnaturally from side to side. What makes the Nuckelavee truly horrifying is its lack of skin. Its entire body, both horse and man, is raw and exposed, revealing dark, pulsating veins, muscles, and organs. A foul stench is said to follow in its wake, the scent of rotting flesh and brine. Its breath is toxic, and legends claim it can wilt crops, sicken livestock, and bring disease to entire villages just by passing nearby. The sight of it is so traumatic that survivors are said to be haunted for the rest of their lives, plagued by fevered dreams and a deep, lingering dread. The creature's origins are murky, as is often the case with beings of oral tradition. Some say it was born from the restless fury of the sea gods, cast upon the land as punishment for forgotten transgressions. Others believe it is a demon that escaped from the underworld during the long, dark winters, when the sun rarely rises above the horizon, and the barrier between worlds grows thin. What is consistent in every tale, however, is the Nuckelavee's hatred of humanity. It does not speak, it does not reason, it comes only to destroy. And yet, the Nuckelavee is not omnipresent. According to legend, it is confined to the sea during the summer months, held at bay by a mysterious spirit known as the Mither o' the Sea. This ancient female entity, perhaps a forgotten sea goddess or elemental force, is said to subdue the Nuckelavee's rage when the waters are calm and the land basks in warmth. But in the colder half of the year, when storms rage and darkness rules, the Mither's power wanes, and the Nuckelavee is free to roam the shores and beyond. Encounters with the creature are rare in the tales, but always catastrophic. In one oft-repeated story, a man named Thomas is said to have crossed paths with the beast late one night while traveling a coastal road. Hearing the rhythmic pounding of hooves behind him, he turned to see a monstrous silhouette rising from the mist. Thomas fled on foot, running faster than he'd ever thought possible. As the creature gained on him, he remembered an old piece of wisdom: the Nuckelavee cannot cross fresh water. Just as the beast reached for him with its grotesque arm, Thomas leapt over a narrow stream, and the creature screamed in fury, unable to pursue. He escaped with his life, but was said to have never spoken again. The Nuckelavee's hatred is not limited to people alone. It is a destroyer of nature, a blight upon the land. In years when crops failed, livestock died without cause, or strange diseases swept through the villages, the elders would murmur that the Nuckelavee had walked the island. They would offer silent prayers to the Mither o' the Sea, begging her to restrain the beast once more. Even today, some fishermen in Orkney make the sign of the cross when passing certain rocky outcrops said to be haunts of the demon. Old beliefs linger in the bones of the land. The symbolic weight of the Nuckelavee is vast. It represents unchecked destruction, the raw terror of pestilence and environmental ruin. In a landscape where survival is tied so closely to the rhythms of the sea and soil, a being like the Nuckelavee is a personification of everything that can go wrong, everything beyond human control. The creature's skinless form may symbolize disease, while its unholy fusion of man and beast hints at the breaking of natural laws. It is a warning of what happens when balance is lost. And yet there is something strangely poignant about the Nuckelavee myth. For all its horror, it reinforces the importance of the cycles of nature, the seasons, and the unseen forces that hold chaos at bay. The Mither o' the Sea, while often a background figure in the stories, plays a vital role as the guardian of harmony. Her silent, seasonal battle with the Nuckelavee is a reminder that even in darkness there is resistance, that destruction is not absolute. The Nuckelavee is not as widely known as other mythological beings, but it has found its way into modern culture in subtle ways. Echoes of its form can be seen in horror films and fantasy literature, often serving as inspiration for twisted creatures that blur the line between the human and the monstrous. Its legacy persists in the Orkney imagination, passed down in hushed tones, often as a means of warning children to stay away from dangerous waters or to respect the changing moods of the sea. In recent years, scholars and folklorists have revisited the tale of the Nuckelavee, examining its roots through the lenses of psychology, ecology, and mythology. Some interpret it as a manifestation of collective trauma, an expression of fear in a time when plagues and famines were genuine, existential threats. Others see it as a cautionary tale about the perils of hubris and environmental neglect. In either case, the monster is not just a beast, but a mirror held up to humanity's deepest anxieties. Much like the Wendigo of North America or the Bunyip of Australian Aboriginal lore, the Nuckelavee serves as a cultural touchstone, a reminder of the boundaries between the known and the unknowable. It exists in the liminal spaces, the edges of maps, the margins of memory. It teaches no lessons, offers no redemption. It is a force to be feared, but also to be understood, for in understanding our monsters, we begin to understand ourselves. The legend of the Nuckelavee endures not because it is comforting, but because it is stark and raw and deeply human. It speaks to the fear of the sea, the terror of illness, and the frailty of life. It reminds us that there are things older than us, stronger than us, and far less merciful. And so the story lives on, carried by the wind across the moors and cliffs of Orkney. Passed from elder to child, it slips into dreams and lingers in the fog. It is said that when the waves crash louder than usual, and the smell of rot hangs heavy in the air, the Nuckelavee walks again. And if you should find yourself alone on a coastal path on a winter's night, with hoofbeats echoing in the distance, run, run fast, and pray there's a stream nearby. If terror once rode the waves on twisted limbs and rotting breath, it now waits in silence beneath the deep, where ancient coils stir in the dark. In the storm-racked waters of the North Atlantic, where icy winds scream through the rigging of ships and waves rise like mountains to swallow the sky, sailors have long spoken in hushed voices of a beast too large to be real, yet too persistent in legend to be entirely false. It is said to dwell in the abyssal deep, where light never reaches and the bones of ships lie scattered like forgotten dreams. When it stirs, the sea churns and the heavens darken. This is the legend of the Kraken, the Leviathan of the deep. The Kraken is rooted in Scandinavian folklore, its name likely derived from the Old Norse word kraki, meaning twisted or unhealthy animal. Early accounts dating back to the 12th century described the creature as more island than animal, a mass so vast it was often mistaken for land. Ships would anchor upon its back, only to discover too late that the island was breathing. With a sudden shudder, the beast would descend into the depths, dragging entire vessels and their terrified crews to watery graves. To ancient mariners, this was not just a tale, it was a warning. Descriptions of the Kraken vary, but the most enduring image is that of a monstrous cephalopod, its tentacles long enough to wrap around a galleon and crush it like driftwood. Eyes the size of shields, a beak capable of splitting oak, and skin slick with brine and scars from ancient battles. Some stories say it had a forest of spikes on its back, others insist it possessed a foul intelligence, not human but cruel in its own alien way. It could summon whirlpools, generate storms, and lure ships with deceptive calm before striking with sudden explosive violence. In those days, the sea was a living force, mysterious and unforgiving. Superstitions guided every voyage. A sudden calm or an odd formation of birds could signal the Kraken's presence. Crews would go silent, casting offerings of salted meat or rum into the sea, hoping to appease the monster or distract it just long enough to escape. Maps from the era bore warnings, "Here be monsters," scrawled near uncharted waters. Mariners whispered of sightings off the coast of Norway, near Greenland, and deep in the Arctic Circle, where cold and darkness reign. The Kraken was the embodiment of everything unknown and deadly about the ocean. Yet the Kraken was not born purely from imagination. Many scholars believe the myth was inspired by sightings of real giant squids, enormous creatures that dwell in the inky depths and occasionally wash ashore, their long, sinewy limbs a horror to behold. Though giant squids are rarely seen alive, their existence has been confirmed by modern science, with specimens recorded reaching lengths of up to 60 feet. To a medieval sailor, glimpsing such a beast in the half-light of dawn, writhing on the surface, it would not have seemed like a creature of nature. It would have seemed like a god of death. There are stories, too, of battles between the Kraken and whales, epic underwater clashes that shook the sea for miles around. Sailors told of witnessing a pod of sperm whales fleeing in terror, pursued by a shadow beneath the waves. Some said the Kraken fed on whales, using its immense strength to drag them into the deep. Others believed the creature fed on fear itself, drawn to the scent of panic and the cries of dying men. Despite its terror, the Kraken held a strange allure. It became a symbol not just of fear, but of awe. Writers and naturalists of the Enlightenment, such as Carl Linnaeus, mentioned the Kraken in early scientific texts. It blurred the line between myth and reality, between sailor's tale and biological curiosity. In art and literature, the Kraken evolved, taking on new shapes and meanings. It became a metaphor for the unknown, for the vast power of nature, and for humanity's smallness in the face of the cosmos. One of the most chilling aspects of the Kraken myth is its silence. It does not roar or shriek. It rises from the deep, with no warning but the sudden stillness of the sea. Birds scatter, fish vanish, the sky grows heavy, then with a lurch and a thunderous crash, it strikes. Tentacles break the surface like pillars of smoke, grasping and tearing. Wood shatters, men scream, and then all is quiet again, save for the wind and the waves. The Kraken is not portrayed as evil in the traditional sense. It does not hunt out of malice or vengeance. It is simply what it is, a force of nature beyond human comprehension. In this way, it resembles the great leviathans of other cultures, the sea serpents of Greek lore, the Taniwa of Maori legend, the Umibuzu of Japanese seas. Each is a warning. Each is a reminder of the deep's vast, unknowable power. In modern times, the Kraken has been reimagined countless ways. It looms in films, video games, and novels, often more beast than legend, but always tied to the sea's dark heart. Yet, the core of the myth remains. It is about the fear of what lies beneath, the dread that something ancient and monstrous might still dwell in the deep, waiting for the right moment to rise again. Some oceanographers suggest that the depths of the ocean remain so unexplored that creatures larger and stranger than anything we know could still exist, hidden from sight. In this light, the Kraken is more than just a story. It is a placeholder for our ignorance, a name we give to the dread we feel when staring into a black and bottomless sea, and perhaps that is why the tale persists. Not because we believe in a literal monster, but because we understand, deep down, that the sea holds secrets, that for all our technology, there are places we have not seen, sounds we cannot explain, and shadows we cannot chase away. The Kraken, in its many forms, is a symbol of that haunting truth. The people of Scandinavia once feared the Kraken, but they also respected it. In their eyes, it was not a villain, but a deity of the sea, to be feared, yes, but also honored. Its power was a part of the ocean's balance, a necessary force in a world where nature reigns supreme. Even now, centuries later, the legend retains that dual edge. It terrifies and fascinates, repels and invites. It is said that on moonless nights, when the sea is unnaturally calm and the stars vanish behind sudden clouds, you might hear a distant rhythmic pulsing from beneath the waves, the sound of ancient limbs unfurling, the sea itself holding its breath. Sailors still look over their shoulders on such nights, gripping their ropes a little tighter, casting nervous glances to the black horizon. And though they may laugh at the old stories by daylight, when darkness falls, they remember the Kraken. For in the deep places of the world, where even light dares not go, there are still things that wait, things that do not forget, things that rise when the silence grows too long. While some horrors rise from the ocean's depths, others crawl from the earth itself, hungry, hollow, and forever restless. In the wind-swept deserts and moonlit ruins of the Middle East, where the sand swallows time and the night echoes with ancient whispers, there is a name spoken with caution and fear. It is a name that belongs not to man nor beast, but to something far older, something that watches from the dunes, that waits beneath the earth, and that feeds when no one is looking. Among the oldest of monsters, it is the Ghoul. To outsiders, the Ghoul might seem like another creature of myth, a boogeyman for stories by the fire. But within the rich tapestry of Arabic and pre-Islamic folklore, the Ghoul is no simple legend. It is a force of dread, a being of corruption, the embodiment of death twisted by hunger. Ghouls are not born, they are made, and their hunger is eternal. The earliest tales describe them as shapeshifters, creatures that walk between the living and the dead. They dwell in the desolate places, abandoned cities, wind-swept graveyards, caves that never see light. Their preferred dwelling is the cemetery, where silence reigns and the veil between life and death is thin. There they wait, and there they feed. Unlike ghosts, ghouls are physical, they have flesh, and unlike vampires, they do not seduce or charm. Their hunger is raw, animalistic. They feed on the dead, digging through graves for rotting flesh and brittle bone. But their craving does not end there. Once a ghoul has tasted death, it grows bolder. It watches the living, especially those who linger too long near the edge of sorrow. In some stories, it lures travelers into the desert, calling to them with the voice of a loved one, or appearing as a beautiful woman in need of help. But once the traveler steps too close, the illusion fades, and the feast begins. Descriptions vary, but many stories agree on certain features: skin like old parchment, stretched tight over a skeletal frame, glowing eyes, sunken deep in the skull, teeth sharpened by gnawing bone, fingers elongated into claws for digging through soil and flesh. They move like shadows, silent and sudden, with an unnatural speed. The scent of decay follows them. Their origins are murky. In pre-Islamic mythology, ghouls were seen as desert demons, born from wicked spirits or the cursed dead. With the rise of Islam, some interpretations recast them as a type of jinn, supernatural beings made of smokeless fire, capable of both good and evil. But the ghoul is rarely good. It is a deviant among jinn, one that has embraced filth, death, and perversion. In some tales, a ghoul is what a soul becomes if it defies divine order, a warning of what happens to those who fall too far. The name ghoul itself became a root word across languages. In Arabic, it means to seize or snatch. In Persian, ghoul came to mean a giant. In Urdu and Hindi, it retained its essence of monstrousness. The English word ghoul, first used in the 18th century, was lifted straight from these tales, but often diluted, made into Halloween caricatures. The original was far more sinister. The ghoul is not just a scavenger, it is a corruptor. It defiles not only flesh, but memory. In some versions, a ghoul consumes the identity of its victims. By eating their heart or brain, it can mimic them, their voice, their walk, their secrets. It returns to the victim's family, wearing their face like a mask, pretending to be who it is not. This ability makes it especially feared, for how can you mourn someone if you do not know they're truly gone? How can you trust anyone if a ghoul might wear their skin? Despite its terrifying powers, the ghoul is not invulnerable. Across the centuries, storytellers preserved a number of defenses. Holy words, prayers, or the call to prayer are said to drive it back, for the ghoul is a creature of impurity. Iron, too, is a common ward, blades forged with prayer, or nails placed at the entrance of tombs, said to keep the creature from desecrating the dead. Fire is another weakness. A ghoul that is trapped and burned cannot reform. Its ash must be scattered, far from the place of its feeding. But these protections only work if you know what you're facing. And ghouls are clever. They observe. They learn. In some stories, they masquerade as sages, or holy men, or grieving widows. Their deception runs deep, and the only hint of their true nature is in their reflection, or lack thereof. Mirrors, it is said, cannot hold a ghoul's image. Over time, the legend of the ghoul has traveled far from its origins. European writers, from William Beckford in Vathek to H.P. Lovecraft in his necrotic visions, borrowed the creature and adapted it, but they changed it. Western versions often turn ghouls into lesser undead, corpse eaters in graveyards, or mindless minions of necromancers. They lost the intelligence, the cunning, the tragic horror of the original. For in the old stories, ghouls were not just monsters, they were cautionary figures, warnings against desecration, against pride, against forgetting the sanctity of death. The ghoul also symbolizes fear of decay, not just of the body, but of the spirit. To become a ghoul is to lose oneself utterly. Some myths claim that those who eat human flesh willingly, especially in desperate times, may become ghouls after death. The transformation is not immediate. It begins with dreams, burial, hunger, blood, then comes the craving. Eventually, the soul warps and the body follows. What remains is a shell of the person, consumed by the need to consume. Even today, echoes of the ghoul survive. In modern horror, in tales of shapeshifters and cryptids, in the persistent fear of desecration and the uncanny. Soldiers in distant deserts speak of shadows that move without wind. Archaeologists working in ancient tombs sometimes leave offerings, not to gods, but to whatever still lingers. There are always stories. A hiker disappears near a forgotten graveyard. A funeral is held, but the body was never found. A village seals off a cave with bricks and holy symbols, refusing to say why. The ghoul, it seems, is never far. It is more than a monster. It is a mirror held up to our own decay, our own corruption. It reminds us that hunger, when unchecked, can destroy the soul, that forgetting the dead, or mocking them, invites things we are not prepared to face, that there are still places in the world where something ancient watches and waits. So if you find yourself walking alone, near dusk, and you see someone familiar in the distance, a voice you know, calling your name from among the gravestones, be careful, look for their shadow, check their reflection, and whatever you do, do not follow them into the dark, because some appetites do not die, and some dead things still hunger. From the ancient tombs of the Middle East to the shadowy edges of rural farms, something still lurks in the dark, preying on the unsuspecting with a thirst that defies explanation. In the still, sweltering heat of the Caribbean night, where the jungle breathes and the shadows stretch long over forgotten roads, there is a name whispered with dread, a creature neither wholly of myth nor entirely dismissed by science. In the rural corners of Puerto Rico, farmers once woke to find their livestock dead, drained of blood, their bodies untouched, no footprints leading to or from the scene. They blamed the Chupacabra. The name itself means goat sucker in Spanish, a brutal title that hints at its most infamous behavior. But the Chupacabra is more than a vampire of goats. It is a legend, a fear-given form, a creature born in the space between what is seen and what is believed. Its legend has spread like wildfire, from the highlands of Puerto Rico to the deserts of Mexico, across the southern United States, and into the deep forests of South America. Each sighting is different, yet eerily the same. Eyewitnesses describe it as a grotesque reptilian creature, about 3 to 4 feet tall, with leathery or scaly greenish-gray skin, spines or quills running down its back, and eyes that glow an unnatural red. Others claim it's more canine in form, a hairless, mangy beast with fangs and claws, crouched low to the ground. Sometimes it walks on 2 legs, sometimes on 4. Its scream, they say, sounds like metal tearing, and it only comes at night. The first widely publicized reports of the Chupacabra emerged in 1995, when a wave of livestock deaths struck Puerto Rico. A woman named Madeleine Tolentino claimed to have seen the creature outside her window, a strange bipedal figure with alien features and long fingers. Around the same time, dozens of animals were found dead across the island, drained of blood through small, precise puncture wounds. No signs of struggle, no tracks, just carcasses, exsanguinated and cold. Skeptics were quick to point fingers, feral dogs, wild cats, even disease. But these explanations failed to account for the bloodless corpses or the consistency of the wounds. And besides, the stories weren't new. In various forms, tales of blood-sucking creatures predated these events by centuries. The Aztecs spoke of Camazotz, a bat god who demanded blood. In the Philippines, there is the Aswang. In Africa, the Aza. Cultures around the world have long believed in beings that feed on blood. The Chupacabra may be a modern version of a very old fear. As the report spread, so did the fear. Mexico, Chile, Brazil, and eventually the southern United States all claimed sightings. Some described it leaping great distances. Others said it moved with terrifying speed. There were even claims that it could drain animals of blood without leaving external wounds, suggesting a more sinister, possibly advanced biological process. The creature had become a global phenomenon, an urban legend stitched together by fear and fascination. Then came the theories. Some believed the Chupacabra was the result of secret government experiments, a biological weapon that had escaped containment. Others thought it was an alien, accidentally or purposefully released on Earth. Its grotesque appearance and bizarre feeding habits seemed too unnatural to be explained by evolution alone. And the timing of its first sightings, just after the infamous Roswell documents were declassified, only added fuel to the fire. Cryptozoologists, those who study creatures not recognized by mainstream science, investigated reports, collected hair samples, and even attempted to trap the creature. But hard evidence remained elusive. Photos were always blurry, DNA from carcasses turned up inconclusive. And yet the sightings continued. Night after night, year after year, people reported eyes in the darkness, a chill on the wind, and animals left empty in the morning. Modern science has attempted to put the legend to rest, in many cases where the Chupacabra was blamed. Researchers later identified the culprit as coyotes suffering from mange, a skin disease that causes hair loss and emaciation, giving them a monstrous, almost alien appearance. These animals, driven by hunger and unable to chase larger prey, may have attacked livestock, biting the neck in the most vulnerable spot. The blood loss, a trick of perception, the lack of wounds, a result of post-mortem changes. Still, many refuse to accept this explanation. They say the wounds were too clean, the blood too thoroughly gone. They insist what they saw was not a dog, not a coyote, but something else. And they point to the consistency of descriptions across countries and cultures as evidence that something real lurks behind the myth. The Chupacabra, like many folkloric creatures, exists in a strange liminal space, part biological mystery, part cultural mirror. It reflects our fears of the night, of predation, of the unknown. It emerged at a time when the world was grappling with change, economic instability, environmental degradation, and the spread of information that traveled faster than ever before. In that space, monsters thrive. There is also a psychological element. In times of uncertainty, people look for simple explanations to complex fears. The Chupacabra became a symbol, a scapegoat for misfortune, a face to put on the creeping sense of vulnerability that came with rural isolation and weakening traditions. And in the digital age, it became something more. A meme, a brand, a story shared across borders. Still, for those who live in places where the jungle presses in close and the night brings silence that is too complete, the Chupacabra is no joke. Children are warned to keep the animals indoors. Farmers keep watch. Some leave offerings of food or salt to keep it away. Others carry machetes and stay inside after dark. Because whether it is a wild dog, an alien experiment, or a demon from old stories, the effect is the same. In the minds of those who have seen it, the Chupacabra is real, and that belief alone is enough to keep the legend alive. There are stories told around fires and whispered in kitchens, passed from generation to generation, stories of something watching from the tree line, of glowing eyes that vanish when you try to look directly at them, of animals that scream once in the night, and then never again. It doesn't matter that science has explanations. Science doesn't sit alone in the dark with a dying flashlight, listening to the jungle breathe. Science doesn't have to go out in the morning and bury what's left of your herd. The Chupacabra may not be a species recognized by taxonomy, but it has a footprint in human consciousness. It is stitched into the folklore of entire regions. It thrives in isolation and doubt, feeding not on goats, but on the human need to believe that there is still something out there, something wild and unexplained. So if you find yourself on a lonely back road in the dead of night, and you hear something moving through the brush, low and careful, don't shine your light, don't call out, just keep walking, and hope the Chupacabra isn't hungry. The blood-drained carcasses left behind in the night are only one face of terror. Some nightmares are stitched together from many. In the arid heartlands of ancient Lycia, where the mountains cast long shadows across dry, cracked earth and olive trees whisper to the wind, a legend took root that has endured for millennia. It speaks of a creature born not of nature but of chaos, a thing so fearsome and unnatural that its name became a byword for monstrosity. This is the tale of the Chimera, the fire-breathing hybrid of Greek mythology that haunted the dreams of shepherds and kings alike. The Chimera was no ordinary beast. It was a fusion of three animals, each terrifying in its own right, merged into a single grotesque form. Most ancient descriptions agree the Chimera had the body and head of a lion, symbolizing raw strength and ferocity. From its back rose the head of a goat, often said to be bleeding madly and exuding madness and unpredictability. Its tail, rather than ending in fur or bone, was a living serpent, writhing with its own awareness and striking out with venomous intent. This amalgamation of creatures made the Chimera not just unnatural, but an affront to the natural order, a living contradiction that defied logic and inspired awe and terror. But the Chimera's horror did not end with its form. The creature was said to breathe fire, spewing jets of flame from its lion's maw that could melt armor and reduce stone to ash. Legends tell of the creature laying waste to entire herds and villages, scorching the earth in its wake. The ground where it tread was said to become cursed, unable to yield crops or sustain life for years afterward. The Chimera was not just a predator, it was destruction incarnate, a roving calamity sent to punish the hubris of man. The origins of the Chimera are as mysterious and mythic as the creature itself. According to the ancient poets, it was the offspring of Typhon and Echidna, two primordial monsters known as the parents of many of Greek mythology's most fearsome beasts. Typhon was a monstrous storm giant whose rage nearly unseated the gods, and Echidna, a half-woman, half-snake creature, was his consort. From their union came not just the Chimera, but also Cerberus, the Hydra, and the Sphinx. This lineage alone marks the Chimera as something far beyond the ordinary, a creature born of chaos and doom. Its home was said to be in the rugged hills of Lycia, a wild region of what is now southwestern Turkey. In ancient times, Lycia was a land shrouded in mist and mystery, a borderland between the civilized Greek world and the untamed wilds of Anatolia. To the people who lived there, the Chimera was not merely myth, but a palpable threat. Travelers spoke of scorched fields, missing livestock, and strange howls in the night. Smoke rising from distant hills was sometimes blamed not on lightning or bandits, but on the Chimera's wrath. The creature's reign of terror eventually reached the ears of King Bates of Lycia, who sought a hero to slay the beast. That hero came in the form of Bellerophon, a prince of Corinth unjustly exiled and seeking redemption. Bates, hoping to rid himself of Bellerophon, sent him on what was meant to be a suicide mission to kill the Chimera. But Bellerophon had an edge. He had tamed the winged horse Pegasus, a gift from the gods. Mounted on the divine steed, Bellerophon flew above the Chimera's reach, dodging fire and serpent strikes, and rained down death from the skies. In the most popular version of the tale, he thrust a spear tipped with lead into the Chimera's throat. The beast's own fire melted the lead, which poured into its gullet and solidified, choking it from within. The monster died writhing, its three heads screaming in discordant agony. Yet even in death, the Chimera did not vanish entirely. Its name lived on not just as a legend, but as a symbol. To the ancient Greeks, the Chimera came to represent the unholy blending of things that should never be joined. It was a warning about crossing boundaries, about tampering with forces beyond comprehension. Philosophers used the term to describe delusions or impossible ideas. Later, the Romans adopted the word as a metaphor for wild dreams and foolish ambitions. And today, we still use Chimera to describe fantasies or unnatural combinations, a legacy born from a monster. There are places in modern Turkey, particularly near the ancient city of Olympos, where flames still issue from cracks in the earth. Called Yanartash, flaming rock, these eternal fires have burned for thousands of years, fueled by natural gas seeping from the mountainside. Ancient writers like Pliny the Elder linked these fires to the Chimera, suggesting they were the last vestiges of the creature's fury, still smoldering beneath the earth. Pilgrims and poets alike have stood before these flames, feeling the weight of myth pressing through time. The Chimera's symbolic weight is immense. As a creature of multiple forms, it embodies contradiction, strength and madness, fire and poison, predator and plague. It represents the unnatural, the uncanny, the stitched-together horrors that exist on the edge of nightmares. Unlike many mythological creatures that serve as guardians or teachers, the Chimera offers no wisdom, no moral lesson, only devastation. It is a living warning, a roaring embodiment of disorder. Despite this, it has fascinated people for centuries. Medieval bestiaries included the Chimera as a real creature, a devilish sign of the end times. Renaissance artists painted it as a challenge to be overcome, a metaphor for the triumph of reason over chaos. In modern fantasy literature and games, the Chimera continues to evolve, sometimes portrayed as a magical experiment gone wrong or a guardian of dark secrets. But the core of the myth remains unchanged. It is something that should not exist, but does. The tale of the Chimera endures not just because of its terror, but because of its mystery. We are drawn to what defies categorization, to creatures that challenge the order we impose on the world. The Chimera is a symbol of what happens when boundaries break down between species, between elements, between the known and the unknowable. In its fiery breath and triple-headed form, we glimpse the fears that haunted our ancestors, fears of disease, of war, of the natural world turning hostile and strange. And so, the story lives on, whispered in the wind that moves through Lycia's ancient hills, flickering in the flames that never die, lurking in the recesses of imagination, where reason ends and the monstrous begins. The Chimera may have fallen to Bellerophon's spear, but in the human mind, it breathes fire still. Even beasts born of chaos, such as the Chimera, pale before the ones who sit in silent judgment, weighing the worth of every soul. In the heat-haze stillness of ancient Egypt, where the Nile carved life into a land of stone and sand, there is a legend whispered in the silence of tombs and echoed in the prayers of the dead. It is not the tale of a god or a monster, but something far more fearsome, a final arbiter, a devourer of unworthy souls. She does not chase or curse or haunt. She waits, patient, eternal, and terrifying. This is the legend of Ammit, the devourer of the dead. Ammit is a creature from ancient Egyptian mythology, dwelling not among the living but in the underworld, at the threshold of eternity. Unlike gods who rule or demons who torment, Ammit's purpose is singular and merciless, to consume the hearts of the wicked. She appears only at the most crucial moment in a soul's journey, at the weighing of the heart, a divine trial overseen by Osiris, Anubis, and Thoth. Her name means devourer or eater of the dead, and her form is stitched together from the fiercest beasts of Egypt, the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. Each animal was feared in life, and together they embody unstoppable destruction. But to understand Ammit is to understand the values of ancient Egypt. The Egyptians believed the heart, not the brain, held a person's soul, thoughts, memories, morals, and emotions. When a person died, their heart was placed on the scales of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and cosmic order. On the other side of the scale rested the feather of Ma'at. If the heart was lighter or equal in weight, the soul was deemed pure and allowed to pass into the eternal paradise, known as the Field of Reeds. But if the heart was heavy with sin, deceit, cruelty, greed, then Ammit acted. She would open her crocodile jaws and devour the heart whole. In that moment, the soul did not go to a hell of fire or punishment, it simply ceased to exist. This was called the second death, and to the Egyptians, it was the greatest horror imaginable. No afterlife, no rebirth, no legacy, just silence. Ammit was not evil. She was not malevolent. She was justice made flesh, a living threat to the impure, a final stop for those who defied Ma'at. While she was never worshipped, her image appeared in funerary texts and tombs, a silent warning to those preparing for judgment. She was not a being to fear if one lived rightly. In fact, many would take comfort knowing that she protected the sanctity of the afterlife from corruption. Her role in the grand cosmic system was vital. Ma'at was more than just a goddess. It was the principle upon which all of existence rested. Pharaohs were charged with upholding Ma'at, and every citizen from scribe to servant was expected to live in harmony with it. To break Ma'at was to invite chaos into the world, and chaos in the Egyptian mind was a fate worse than death. Ammit was the final enforcer of this balance, her very presence a deterrent to wickedness. Depictions of Ammit show her crouched beneath the scales, eyes locked on the heart, waiting with tireless hunger. She never moves, never speaks. She only acts if the scales tip against the soul. That stillness is what makes her terrifying. She is not a predator seeking prey. She is the punishment that comes after the choices have already been made. There are few stories of Ammit encountering the living. She does not walk the earth or test the hearts of mortals in life. Her world is the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, a place both beautiful and terrifying, filled with gods, spirits, and endless dangers for the unprepared soul. The journey through the Duat was treacherous, a trial in itself, but the final judgment was what truly mattered. All preparation, all ritual, all moral teaching pointed toward this moment. And yet, like all great symbols, Ammit has layers. She is not only the destroyer of the wicked, she is a mirror, a reflection of human fear, of guilt, of doubt. Her existence makes people ask, What is in my heart? What will remain when the scales are set before me? In this way, Ammit becomes more than myth. She becomes a moral compass. Some modern scholars interpret Ammit through psychological or symbolic lenses. She may represent the weight of regret, the fear of being forgotten, the anxiety of legacy. Others see her as a metaphor for justice and a society that prized moral order above all. Even her form, hybrid unnatural, speaks to the consequences of spiritual imbalance. She is what happens when one loses harmony with Matt, when one becomes something grotesque and incomplete. In this way, Ammit is closer to an elemental force than a creature. She does not grow or change. She does not offer redemption or second chances. Her hunger is not for food, but for unworthy memory. She devours not just the heart, but the echo of a soul. In one fragmentary tale passed down in the Book of the Dead, a soul named Kinti stands before the scales. His heart is heavy, weighed by lies told in life and injustices committed in secret. As Anubis lowers the feather, the scale dips and does not rise. Ammit stirs. The other gods say nothing. There is no plea, no appeal. With a sound like stone grinding over stone, she moves forward, jaws opening. Kinti cries out, not for mercy, but for remembrance. But his cry fades as the heart disappears into her maw, and with it, so does he. The priests say that even in paradise, one can still hear the echo of bones cracking under her bite. In the modern world, Ammit has resurfaced in pop culture, from films to graphic novels to video games. Often, she is recast as a villain, a monster to be slain, or a judge to be outwitted. But these portrayals miss the essence of what she truly is. Ammit does not chase. She does not tempt. She does not choose. She waits, and acts only when justice demands it. Much like the Nuckelavee of the Orkneys or the Wendigo of North America, Ammit occupies a unique place in myth, the place of final consequence. She is not just a beast in the dark. She is the last silence, the closing of a book, the weight of one's life made manifest. In a world where death was not the end, but the beginning of the true journey, Ammit was the guardian of its gateway. And so the legend endures, not in fear, but in warning. Live in truth, walk in balance, keep your heart light, for one day all must face the scales. And if the heart fails, Ammit waits, not in anger, not in hate, but in perfect, terrifying justice. Not all omens come in the form of monsters, however. Some arrive as a wail on the wind, mourning the living before death has even come. In the mist-laced hills of Ireland, where ancient stones mark forgotten boundaries and the wind carries the weight of centuries, there is a sound that no one wishes to hear. It comes not with thunder or tempest, but in a low, keening wail that floats through the night, so piercing and mournful that even the bravest souls fall silent. It is the voice of the Banshee, the herald of death, and her cry is said to mean that someone, somewhere, will soon take their last breath. The Banshee is among the most enduring figures in Irish folklore, a spectral woman whose presence is tied not to violence or vengeance, but to sorrow. She does not cause death, she mourns it. But even this passive role makes her terrifying, for to see her, or worse, to hear her cry, is to know that death is near. The word Banshee comes from the Irish Bean Sidhe, meaning woman of the fairy mound, suggesting ancient pre-Christian origins, tied to the AOC, the supernatural race of fairies and spirits, who inhabit the hidden places of the land. Descriptions of the Banshee vary by region and storyteller. In some tales, she appears as a beautiful young woman with flowing hair, clad in a silver or white gown, her eyes red from endless weeping. In others, she is a bent old crone, shrouded in a cloak and veiled in darkness. Some say she floats above the ground, hair streaming in the wind, while others insist she perches silently on windowsills or glides through the trees, barely more than a shadow. But all agree on her most chilling trait, her wail, a cry so sorrowful and so unearthly that it chills the blood and haunts the soul. This keening cry, known as the cowie, is rooted in a very real tradition. Professional mourners called keeners once lamented at Irish funerals with similar vocal expressions of grief. The Banshee, then, may be a supernatural extension of this practice, a spirit who mourns before the death has even occurred. In some accounts, she weeps for noble families, particularly those with surnames starting with O or Mac, though in modern tales, her reach extends to all who have deep roots in Irish soil. Encounters with the Banshee are deeply personal. She does not appear en masse or in grand public hauntings. She comes to the solitary traveler, the insomniac lying awake in their bed, the child who hears sobbing outside their window. Her presence is intimate, almost respectful, as though she grieves with the family rather than against them, and yet her appearance is rarely welcomed. For those who hear her wail know that death has already taken notice. There are stories of people seeing her brushing her hair with a silver comb, another folkloric element with deep symbolic meaning. The comb, a seemingly innocent object, is said to hold power in the spirit world. To pick up a comb dropped by a banshee is to invite misfortune or abduction. In some tales, men who find a comb on a forest path and pocket it are later haunted by the banshee until they return it, or worse, vanish without a trace. Though she is feared, the banshee is not evil. She is a mourner, a guardian of tradition, and perhaps even a remnant of a forgotten goddess. Some scholars link her to the ancient Celtic mother goddesses or war deities like the Morrigan, who was known to foretell death in battle. Others suggest she is a spiritual echo of women who died in sorrow or childbirth, continuing to cry for the loved ones they left behind. Whatever her origins, her purpose remains consistent: to forewarn, to grieve, and to remind the living of life's fragility. Legends differ on how many banshees might exist. Some say there is one banshee for every old Irish family, eternally tied to their lineage. Others believe she is a singular spirit who travels where she is needed, guided by ancestral ties or cosmic knowledge. In either case, the tales emphasize her connection to bloodlines and heritage, as though she watches over certain families through generations, her voice rising in sorrow whenever death draws near. One of the most famous banshee stories involves the powerful O'Brien clan. It is said that every time a member of the family was close to death, a banshee would appear near their estate, wailing by the riverbanks or in the orchards. A similar tale is told of the McCarthy family, where the cry of the banshee was considered both a warning and a sacred rite, signaling the importance of the one about to pass. These stories were not always met with fear, but with solemn acceptance, as though the banshee's presence was as much a part of death as the final breath itself. In rare instances, the banshee is said to sing, not wail. Her song is described as beautiful and heartbreaking, filled with words no one can remember, but which carry the weight of deep loss. Some believe these moments mark the passing of a particularly good soul, and that the banshee too feels the pain of their departure. In this form, she becomes almost angelic, a bridge between the worlds of the living and the dead, guiding spirits into the afterlife with her sorrowful song. Despite her prominence in Irish folklore, stories of the banshee have spread beyond the Emerald Isle. Irish immigrants carried the legend with them to the Americas and beyond, and over time, she became part of a broader tapestry of ghostly women who warn of death. The Scottish Bean Nai, the Welsh Sireth, even the Latin American La Llorona, though different in form and story, all share the core theme of loss, grief, and the supernatural echo of death's approach. In modern times, the banshee has taken on new forms in literature and media, sometimes distorted into a malevolent ghost or a shrieking banshee monster. But these interpretations miss the depth and subtlety of the original folklore. The true banshee is not a villain. She is a reflection of our own fear of death and the grief that follows it. She embodies the love we have for those we lose and the pain of their passing. Her cry is the cry of humanity, mourning the inevitable. Some say she still wanders the hills and moors, appearing only to those who carry the old blood in their veins. They say her voice can be heard when the wind is high and the night is still, weaving through the trees and stone fences, slipping into homes where a candle flickers too low. She does not knock. She does not wait. She sings, or she wails, and then she is gone. Whether spirit, goddess, or ancient memory, the banshee endures. She reminds us that death is not just an end, but a part of the story, one that deserves to be mourned. And so her legend lingers, in the silence between heartbeats, in the hush of the fog, in the whisper of a song that has no words. The banshee walks beside us, unseen but always near, her voice forever echoing the sorrow of goodbye. While the banshee itself is very dangerous, even the wail of death pales in comparison to a monster whose very stare spells doom. In the arid wastes of forgotten deserts, In the ruins of cities whose names have been swallowed by time, there are stories of something ancient, not a god, not a demon, something else, born of earth, yet unnatural. In every era, in every retelling, it wears a crown of death. The basilisk. To call it a serpent would be a disservice. To call it a monster would not be enough. For the basilisk, in the minds of the ancients, was the king of serpents, basiliskos in Greek, little king. And while it may have been small in size, the power attributed to it was colossal. One look, they said, and you would die. One breath, and the grass would wither. One hiss, and the land would turn to ash. The earliest known account comes from Pliny the Elder, writing in the 1st century CE. In his Natural History, he describes a creature no longer than 12 fingers, barely a foot in length. Yet despite its size, it held the power to kill with a glance. Its venom was so potent that it could travel up a spear and kill the man who wielded it. No weapon could touch it without consequence. It did not slither, it scorched the earth behind it. Even other snakes fled from its path. This, Pliny claimed, was no ordinary animal. It was death incarnate. The basilisk, he wrote, was born in the deserts of Cyrene, in North Africa. It was not just poisonous, it was toxic to existence itself. Travelers were warned to avoid the region entirely, and yet, fascination persisted, because something so deadly, so impossible, had to mean something more. In ancient Rome and Greece, it became a symbol, not just of fear, but of absolute power. The kind of power that didn't need to fight to win, it simply needed to be seen. Over time, the story began to change. The simple snake of Pliny's era evolved into something more grotesque and more mythical. In medieval Europe, where bestiaries blended the natural with the supernatural, the basilisk took on a hybrid form. It still had the coiled body of a serpent, but now its head bore the features of a rooster, comb, beak, and all. Some depictions gave it wings, like a dragon, others gave it legs. It was a chimera, a contradiction, a creature not born of the world, but of imagination twisted by fear. Its origin, too, became stranger. The basilisk was now said to be born from a serpent's egg, laid in a compost heap and incubated by a rooster, an inversion of nature, a mockery of birth. Some accounts reverse this further, claiming a rooster laid the egg and a toad hatched it. However it came to be, the result was the same, a creature that should not exist. And still, its powers grew. Beyond the deadly gaze, beyond the venom, it was said to exude an aura of death. Fields in its path turned sterile. Birds fell dead from the sky. Its breath could shatter stones. Its presence defiled the sacred and desecrated the pure. And most terrifying of all, it did not need to act. Simply being was enough to kill. But like every monster, the basilisk had a weakness, a strange, almost poetic one. The weasel. Weasels, it was believed, were the basilisk's natural enemies, not because they were stronger, but because they were immune. Something about their scent, or their courage, allowed them to enter the basilisk's lair, resist its deadly aura, and tear it apart. In medieval texts, weasels were sometimes placed in glass jars and lowered into tunnels, suspected of hiding basilisks. If the weasel survived, it meant the way was safe. If it didn't, well, better the weasel than a man. Another fatal flaw was said to be its own reflection. Like a god of wrath undone by its own image, the basilisk could be killed by looking at itself. Mirrors became a weapon against it. Some stories even say this was how it was ultimately defeated, lured into gazing upon its own lethal stare and perishing in a final, ironic moment. But the basilisk was never just a beast, it was an idea. In Christian medieval thought, the basilisk came to represent sin, deadly, seductive, and self-destructive. Its gaze was like temptation, subtle, effortless, and damning. Just as the basilisk killed with a look, so too could sin corrupt with a thought. Its presence defiled holy ground, just as heresy was believed to defile the soul. In illuminated manuscripts, it was often paired with serpents, toads, and demons, symbols of pride, wrath, and impurity. Its image adorned coats of arms, especially in Eastern Europe. In some regions, it was a warning. In others, a challenge. A ruler who bore the basilisk on their crest was proclaiming something unspoken, that they too wielded deadly authority, that their word, like the basilisk's stare, could kill without a blade. It was power as intimidation, kingship without mercy. Yet there were always those who doubted. By the Enlightenment, scholars began to view the basilisk as a curiosity of superstition, an echo of darker times. Naturalists dismissed the stories as exaggerations of real animals, cobras, vipers, lizards with frills or crests. Some pointed to the spitting cobra of North Africa, whose venom could indeed cause blindness if sprayed into the eyes. Others suggested fossilized remains of prehistoric creatures may have inspired the myth. But none of these theories explained the deeper roots, the symbolism, the persistence, the fear that lingered, and the fear did linger. Even in modern times, the basilisk survives. In literature, it appears as a creature of myth and metaphor. In J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series, the basilisk is reborn in the Chamber of Secrets, its stare still fatal, its presence still terrifying. In video games, it slithers through dark catacombs and cursed lands, a boss to be slain, or a force to flee. The name remains shorthand for something that cannot be reasoned with, only survived. So what is the basilisk? Really, it is a creature of death, but not chaos. It does not chase. It does not hunt. It simply exists, and that is enough. Its power is passive, inescapable, inevitable. And in that, it reflects something deeper in the human psyche, the terror of being seen too clearly, of facing a truth too great to survive, of standing before something so alien, so absolute, that even understanding becomes fatal. It's the quiet fear behind locked doors, the paralysis that comes from realizing you're being watched, the knowledge that something is near, and you cannot look at it without dying. If you find yourself in an old land, under a sky that hasn't changed in centuries, and the birds fall silent and the air grows still, don't look. Don't search for the source. Don't turn the mirror to see what lies behind you, because the basilisk doesn't chase, it doesn't roar, it waits, and some things kill simply by being seen. Beyond the petrifying gaze lies a beast, not of stone but of prophecy, one destined to devour the very gods themselves. In the icy reaches of the Norse world, where the wind howls through blackened fjords and the night stretches long and deep, there is a tale older than memory, passed down by skalds beside hearthfires and etched into the bones of sagas. It is a story of prophecy and dread, of fate wound tighter than a noose around the neck of gods. This is the legend of Fenrir, the great wolf of chaos, whose jaws are destined to devour the sky. Fenrir is no mere beast, but a creature born of divine and monstrous blood. His father is Loki, the trickster god of fire and mischief, and his mother is Angerboda, a giantess of the wild and the dead. From this union sprang 3 children who would one day shape the fate of the cosmos. Hel, ruler of the underworld, Jörmungandr, the world serpent, and Fenrir, the wolf whose hunger knew no end. As a pup, Fenrir was brought to Asgard by the gods, who hoped to keep a watchful eye on the children of Loki. At first he was small, his black fur bristling with frost, his golden eyes gleaming with intelligence. But as he grew, so did their fear. Fenrir became immense, towering over even the tallest of gods. His breath came in steaming gusts, his teeth like iron, and his voice like distant thunder. Though he roamed freely for a time, only Tyr, the god of war and law, dared feed him. The rest dared not approach. The gods knew of the prophecy that Fenrir would one day bring about Ragnarok, the end of the world. They tried to ignore it, tried to believe they could shape fate, but as the wolf grew more terrible by the day, they acted. They resolved to bind him. Twice they tried, first with chains of steel, then with chains of enchanted gold. Fenrir snapped them as if they were reeds, so the gods turned to the dwarves, the master smiths of Svartalfheim, who forged a ribbon called Gleipnir. It was no ordinary chain. It was spun from 6 impossibilities: the sound of a cat's footsteps, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain, the breath of a fish, the spittle of a bird, and the sinews of a bear. Though light as silk, it was unbreakable. The gods approached Fenrir with feigned cheer, asking if he would test this new binding as a show of strength. But the wolf, clever beyond measure, grew suspicious. He agreed, but only if one of them would place their hand in his jaws as a token of trust. Only Tyr stepped forward. As the ribbon tightened, Fenrir thrashed and howled, and when he could not break free, he bit down and severed Tyr's hand. They chained him then on a lonely island, buried beneath the roots of the world tree Yggdrasil. They drove a sword into his mouth to keep his jaws open, and from them flowed rivers of drool, forming lakes of poison. There he lay, bound but not broken, growing more hateful with each passing age, awaiting the day of reckoning. That day is foretold. Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. When the frost giants march from Jotunheim and the dead rise from hell, Fenrir will break his bonds. The earth will shake, the sky will split, and he will charge forward, his howl echoing across the 9 realms. His eyes will burn like coals, and his rage will scorch the heavens. Odin, All-Father, will meet him on the battlefield. The Wise One, bearer of runes, the seeker of truth, will stand tall before the wolf. But Fenrir will not be stopped. He will swallow Odin whole, devouring the god of wisdom in a single, monstrous bite. But vengeance follows. Odin's son Vidar, born for this purpose alone, will step forth in silence. With a boot crafted from all the scraps of leather ever discarded by humankind, he will place one foot in the wolf's gaping jaw, and with his mighty hand, he will rip Fenrir's head in two. And so the wolf falls, but not before his destiny is fulfilled. Yet Fenrir is more than just an end. He is a force, a symbol. He represents the inevitability of fate, the wildness that lies beyond order. The gods sought to control him, feared what he might become, and in trying to bind him, ensured the very outcome they wished to avoid. Fenrir is a mirror held up to the hubris of the divine, a reminder that even the most powerful cannot escape what is written. In Norse cosmology, few beings evoke such awe and dread. Fenrir is not evil in the way mortals define it. He is the consequence of imbalance, the cost of fear. The gods made their choices, and Fenrir was shaped by them. He did not ask to be chained. He did not ask to be feared. He is rage born of betrayal, power born of prophecy. Even now in the cold north, where the auroras dance and the fjords sing, his story lingers. In the wind through pine trees, in the growl of wolves on darkened trails, in the way winter bites the skin and reminds us of forces older and wilder than our own. Some scholars believe the myth of Fenrir reflects societal fears of youth rebelling against order, of chaos rising from suppression. Others see him as a metaphor for nature's might, beautiful, fearsome, untamable. His death at Vidar's hands is not a triumph, but a tragedy, a necessary sacrifice in a cycle destined to repeat. Fenrir's image has endured for centuries. He appears in runestones and medieval texts, in paintings, and in carvings on Viking ships. Today he lives on in fantasy novels, heavy metal music, video games, and even tattoos. He is a symbol of strength, defiance, and the primal howl of something vast and ancient. But at the heart of it, Fenrir is a story about fear, the fear of what we do not understand, the fear of what we cannot control. And in trying to silence that fear, we often create the very thing we dread. So remember the tale of the great wolf, when the wind howls and shadows stretch long across the snow. For when the bonds break and the world trembles, it will be Fenrir who comes first, jaws wide, eyes burning, ready to devour the end and begin it anew. While some monsters rage against fate on the battlefield of the gods, others lurk silently beneath the surface, hidden in the misty depths of our own world. In the mist-cloaked highlands of Scotland, where the air is damp with ancient memory and the lochs run deeper than time, there is a body of water that holds a secret too heavy for the surface. Loch Ness, a ribbon of ink-black water stretching over 20 miles long and nearly 1,000 feet deep. Its stillness is not peace. It is silence with teeth. They call it Nessie, a name passed down through folklore and headlines, through grainy photographs and whispered pub conversations. But the truth behind the Loch Ness monster is older, colder, and more elusive than any tourist postcard would dare suggest. What lives or hides within those waters has sparked centuries of obsession, speculation, and dread. To understand the legend, one must understand the loch itself. Loch Ness sits along the Great Glen Fault, a geological scar that cuts straight across Scotland from coast to coast. It was formed during the last ice age, by the grinding pressure of glaciers, leaving behind a long, narrow trench filled with dark, peaty water. At its deepest, Loch Ness plunges nearly 800 to 1,000 feet, deeper than the North Sea in places. It stretches for over 23 miles, winding between the villages of Fort Augustus and Inverness, and is bordered by steep, forested hills that trap mist and legend alike. Its water is murky, stained by runoff from the surrounding peat bogs. Visibility is often less than 2 feet below the surface. Light doesn't penetrate. Sonar can be unreliable. It's a natural hiding place, a black mirror that reflects only what it chooses to. Stories of a creature in Loch Ness go back more than 1,500 years. The earliest known account comes from the 6th century, in the biography of Saint Columba. The monk reportedly encountered a great beast in the river Ness, ordering it away with the sign of the cross after it attacked a swimmer. The story was written decades after it supposedly occurred, but it planted the seed of something monstrous in the minds of all who heard it. Then came the 1930s, the dawn of modern sightings. In 1933, a couple driving along the newly completed road bordering the loch claimed to see a massive creature cross the road and slip into the water. The story made headlines, igniting a media frenzy. Just a year later, the most famous image of Nessie appeared, the so-called surgeon's photograph. It showed a long neck rising from the water, elegant and prehistoric. For decades, it was taken as evidence until it was revealed to be a hoax in the 1990s. A toy submarine topped with a sculpted head, and yet belief did not fade. That is the strange power of the Loch Ness monster. It resists explanation. Even hoaxes, even rational debunkings, do nothing to kill the idea. Sonar scans have been conducted, submarines have been deployed, scientists have taken environmental DNA, eDNA samples from the loch's waters to catalog every living creature that calls it home. The results, nothing conclusive. And in the world of the unknown, nothing conclusive is more powerful than proof. Descriptions of the creature vary. Some say it resembles a plesiosaur, a long-necked marine reptile believed extinct for over 60 million years. Others say it's more like a giant eel, or a sturgeon, or something entirely unknown to science. The shape always seems to change. Humps, tails, silhouettes against the setting sun. But there is always something just beneath the surface. Eyewitnesses speak with a peculiar kind of clarity. Not wild-eyed or hysterical, but calm, certain. A boat rocked by a sudden wake. A dark mass gliding just under the surface. A head rising above the waves for a breath before vanishing again. Pilots have reported disturbances from above. Divers have returned pale and shaken, swearing they saw something enormous move in the deep. Skeptics point to floating logs, wave patterns, seals, even the occasional swimming deer. But something deeper keeps the legend alive, a sense that this place is special, sacred, haunted. There are locals who won't go near the loch after dark, not because they fear a monster, but because they respect it. Whatever lives there, they say, has always been there, older than any kingdom, older than memory. And while tourists arrive with cameras and curiosity, the loch remains unchanged, silent and watching. Some believe Nessie is not a creature, but a manifestation, an echo of ancient times when spirits moved freely and the boundaries between worlds were thinner. That Loch Ness, like certain forests or deserts, is a liminal place, a threshold between the known and the unknowable. And the monster is just what happens when something from the other side slips through. In the 1970s and 80s, expeditions ramped up. The loch was scanned with sonar, revealing unexplained blips, large moving shapes that defied classification. One team recorded what appeared to be a flipper, another detected something massive at the bottom that moved before it could be identified. And still, Nessie refused to be caught. More recently, DNA studies ruled out large animals like plesiosaurs, yet found evidence of surprisingly high eel populations, raising theories that Nessie could be a mutant eel, grown to impossible size. But the legend resists reduction. It is not just a creature, it is an idea. The Loch Ness monster is a mirror. It reflects our desire to believe in mysteries too large to fit inside a test tube or sonar ping. It reminds us that not everything in the world has been catalogued, tagged, and explained, that there are still shadows deep enough to hide secrets. Whether Nessie is a lost creature from the past, a spiritual echo, or just the shape our wonder takes when projected onto dark water, one thing remains true. People keep watching. And sometimes, when the morning mist hangs low on the surface of the loch, and the world is quiet enough to listen, something stirs. Not a splash, not a cry, just a ripple, a sign. And for those who see it, that is enough. Because in the depths of Loch Ness, belief is not measured in proof. It is measured in silence, in shadow, in the stories we whisper when the water is still. As legends ripple across the surface of that haunted lake, we turn to the deserts and canyons of the American Southwest, where an older, darker presence is said to walk among us, wearing the faces of men. In the shadowed mesas of the American Southwest, where the desert breathes secrets and the rocks remember ancient names, there are stories that have never been written, only whispered. Long after the fire dies and the stars scatter across the black sky, voices carry through the canyons, low, urgent, and warning. Among the Daine, the Navajo people, there is one name never spoken lightly, a name that causes conversations to stop and eyes to search the darkness. The Skinwalker. To outsiders, it is merely folklore, a tale to frighten children or fuel horror stories. But to those who grew up close to the land, whose ancestors spoke with spirits and read signs in the wind, the Skinwalker is real. It is not a creature of myth, but a being of terrifying truth. A witch in the deepest sense of the word, one who has turned away from the natural order and embraced something darker, someone who has given up their humanity for power. In Navajo belief, Skinwalkers are not simply shapeshifters, they are witches and Tohine, who have violated sacred laws, twisting spiritual knowledge for selfish or malicious purposes. Unlike healers, who use ceremonies and chants to bring balance, the Skinwalker perverts these rites, weaponizing them against their own people. Becoming one is not just a physical transformation, it is a complete moral and spiritual inversion. It is the rejection of kinship, of harmony, of the sacred balance between humans and the natural world. To gain their power, it is said a Skinwalker must commit an act so monstrous that it severs their soul from any sense of compassion, the murder of a close relative. This act tears away the last of their humanity, making space for something darker to move in. Once transformed, they walk both worlds, neither fully animal nor fully human. Skinwalkers are said to be masters of disguise, able to take on the form of wolves, coyotes, foxes, owls, or crows, animals traditionally associated with death or bad omens. They wear the skins of these creatures like cloaks, which is why the wearing of animal pelts, especially those of predators, is taboo among many Navajo. But the transformations are not limited to beasts. Some stories say they can mimic the appearance of specific people, walking through a village under the mask of familiarity. Their powers are numerous and deeply feared. Shape-shifting is only the beginning. They are said to move with supernatural speed, vanishing into the night in the blink of an eye. They can leap unnaturally high, run faster than any human, and climb cliffs or walls with ease. They leave behind tracks that suddenly stop mid-step, as if they took flight. They can mimic voices, replicating the sound of a loved one in distress to lure victims into the wild. Their gaze is paralyzing. Some say they can steal your thoughts, knowing your fears and intentions before you act. Skinwalkers are also known to practice dark witchcraft, using cursed objects and ritual tools. Corpse powder, made from ground human bones, is blown into the faces of victims, causing sickness, hallucinations, and even death. They may use bundles of bones, hair, or feathers as talismans to curse homes or individuals. Reports speak of skinwalkers appearing in multiple places at once, of breaking into homes unseen, of killing livestock with surgical precision, leaving behind mutilations no predator could have made. Traditional Navajo medicine men speak of skinwalkers with deep caution. They are not merely supernatural beings, but living witches who walk among the community. Anyone could be one. A neighbor, a family member. That sense of paranoia, of something rotten hiding in plain sight, is part of what makes the legend so disturbing. There are even stories of skinwalkers sitting in ceremonies, undetected, until a true healer calls them out by name, forcing them to flee in shame. But the skinwalker is not invincible. There are ways to fight them, though few dare try. A bullet dipped in white ash is said to be one of the few weapons that can kill a skinwalker. Others say that speaking their true name aloud will strip them of their power. Yet finding out that name is often impossible, and the risk of saying it can draw their wrath. The history of these stories stretches back generations, rooted in centuries of oral tradition. The Navajo and other indigenous peoples of the region treat them with a solemnity that is rarely understood by outsiders, and for good reason. To speak too freely of the Skinwalker is believed to invite its attention. Even now, there are those who will not discuss them after sunset, for fear that the very mention of their name might draw something to the door. And yet, in recent years, stories have spread far beyond the reservations. Ranchers in Utah and New Mexico speak of strange creatures stalking their livestock, of mutilated cattle, of shadowy figures watching from the ridgelines. The infamous Skinwalker Ranch, located in northeastern Utah, has become a hotbed of paranormal activity, drawing investigators and thrill seekers from around the world. Lights in the sky, sudden machinery failure, apparitions, disappearances, all blamed on something ancient and malicious that the land itself remembers. Some say skinwalkers aren't just one thing, but manifestations of a place where reality grows thin and where the rules of nature no longer apply. Skeptics call it superstition. Psychologists offer explanations of mass hysteria, cultural imprinting, or sleep paralysis. But for those who have seen the glowing eyes in the dark or heard their name called from an empty field, there is no need for science. The terror is real, the danger is real, and the skinwalker, whatever it truly is, continues to walk. It is important to remember that these stories are sacred. They are not Halloween costumes or monster movie fodder. They are part of a living tradition, steeped in the trauma of colonization, the legacy of secrecy, and the need to protect what is still untouched by the modern world. To tell these stories is to walk a fine line between understanding and intrusion. But there is something universal in the legend of the Skinwalker. The idea of a person who turns against their community for power, of a predator that looks like a friend, of evil hiding in the face of the familiar. It is this timeless fear, this ancient recognition of the monster within, that keeps the story alive. If you find yourself in the high deserts of the Four Corners region, beneath a sky filled with stars too numerous to count, and you hear footsteps that don't belong, or a voice calling from the dark that sounds almost right but not quite, stay where you are. Do not follow, do not look, and whatever you do, do not answer. Because some things wear skin like a mask, and not everything that speaks in the night deserves to be heard. Far from the red rocks and dry winds, high in the frozen silence of the Himalayas, another creature is said to leave its mark in the snow, massive, solitary, and elusive. High in the frozen heart of the Himalayas, where jagged peaks pierce the heavens and avalanches thunder like ancient gods in rage, whispers ride the wind. Among the snow-swept ridges and ice-bound valleys, there is said to roam a creature as elusive as it is feared, a being of massive stature and primal strength. Known across the mountains by many names, but most famously as the Yeti, it is more than just a legend to those who call these heights home. To the Sherpas, it is a sacred presence, a guardian or a harbinger. To explorers, it is the ultimate mystery, and to the mountains themselves, it is part of the soul carved into every glacier and stone. The Yeti, sometimes called the abominable snowman in Western circles, is a creature rooted deeply in Himalayan folklore, particularly in Tibetan and Nepalese traditions. Descriptions vary, as oral traditions often evolve with time and teller, but common elements run through all accounts. The Yeti is typically portrayed as a massive ape-like figure, standing anywhere from 6 to 10 feet tall, covered in shaggy white or reddish-brown hair, to blend with the snow or rock. Its arms are long and powerful, its legs thick and bowed, its feet enormous. It is bipedal, walking upright like a human, but with a gait that suggests a deep connection to the wild and a detachment from civilization. The creature's most distinctive feature, aside from its size and strength, is its aura of ancientness. It is not just another wild animal in the mountains. The Yeti is said to possess a kind of primordial awareness, a presence that radiates with silence and secrecy. Hunters who have followed strange tracks deep into the snow tell of an oppressive stillness in the air, as though the mountain itself were holding its breath. Those who have seen it, or claim to, speak of eyes not filled with rage or hunger, but with deep, unreadable knowledge, as if the Yeti remembers a time before man walked these peaks. Folklore surrounding the Yeti varies depending on the region. In Nepal, the creature is sometimes considered a mountain spirit or protector. It is believed to be a part of nature, rather than an intruder within it. Some Buddhist monasteries even claim to possess relics of the Yeti, scalps, bones, or hides, which they display with reverence. The monks do not fear the creature, they honor it. To them it is not a monster, but a remnant of a different age, an embodiment of the raw, untamed power of the natural world. Other tales are darker. In certain regions of Tibet, the Yeti is a beast to be feared. It is said to descend from its icy domain during snowstorms, snatching away yaks or even lone travelers. It roams the edge of human habitation, a boundary keeper that punishes those who venture too far into the sacred wilderness. In these stories, it is a punisher of arrogance, of those who think they can conquer the mountains rather than coexist with them. But even in these tales, the Yeti is never described as mindless. Its violence, if it comes, is precise, almost moral. Encounters with the Yeti are often ephemeral. A glimpse between trees, a shape moving across a distant ridge, strange calls echoing through the valleys at night. But its most enduring evidence lies in the footprints. For centuries, Himalayan villagers and Western mountaineers alike have discovered massive human-like tracks in the snow, far from any known trail or settlement. The footprints are often spaced farther than a human stride, and sometimes appear in single file, as though the creature moves with an efficiency unknown to us. One of the most famous of these encounters came in 1951, when British mountaineer Eric Shipton took photographs of enormous footprints in the snow while exploring the Menlum Glacier near Everest. The images caused a sensation, sparking renewed Western interest in the legend and inspiring expeditions in search of the elusive creature. Even Sir Edmund Hillary, one of the first two men to summit Everest, joined a Yeti hunting expedition, though he later expressed doubt about its existence. Still, the footprints, photographs, and countless eyewitness testimonies keep the mystery alive. Some say the Yeti is not a single species, but a family or population of relict hominids, survivors of an ancient lineage that once roamed the earth. Cryptozoologists propose connections to extinct apes like Gigantopithecus, or early human relatives that migrated into the Himalayas and found refuge in the most remote and unforgiving parts of the range. These theories attempt to ground the myth in evolutionary history, offering a biological explanation for what could otherwise be dismissed as mere folklore. But for many, especially the mountain people themselves, scientific proof is beside the point. The Yeti is not simply a creature to be catalogued. It is a symbol, a spiritual echo. It represents the mystery of the wild, the power of the unknown, and the humility required to live in a land that can end a life in a single misstep. In the face of such grandeur, the Yeti reminds us that we are not, and have never been, masters of this world. One well-known tale tells of a group of herders who noticed their yaks growing restless and refusing to graze. That night, a powerful snowstorm descended upon the region. As the wind howled, they heard deep, rhythmic footsteps outside their camp, heavy enough to shake snow from the roof. The next morning, the yaks were untouched, but nearby trees had been stripped of bark, and strange fur hung from the branches. They took it as a sign. The Yeti had passed by, uninterested in violence, but reminding them who truly ruled the mountains. There are stories, too, of those who follow the Yeti's trail not to trap it, but to seek wisdom. Shamans and mystics have long believed that communion with the creature can bring visions or enlightenment. They claim the Yeti dwells at the edge of the physical and spiritual worlds, able to walk between both. To see one, truly see it, is to witness the soul of the Himalayas made flesh. In the modern age, where satellites scan every corner of the globe, and science seems to have demystified nearly everything, the Yeti endures. It endures because there is still wilderness, still silence, still places where no boot has tread, and no eye has seen. The Yeti walks in those places, and in the stories we tell to remember them. Its power lies not only in its strength, but in its ability to remain unknown. The mountains have not given up all their secrets, and perhaps they never will. Even today, there are whispers among climbers and Sherpas on the Everest route. They share them over tea at base camps or around fires in high-altitude huts. A shadow that moved when the moon was high, a howl like no wolf or wind, footprints that appeared, then vanished in fresh snow. These are not tales told for fun. They are warnings, or maybe reverent acknowledgments. The Yeti, whatever it is, remains, not just in the Himalayas, but in the collective human psyche. A symbol of the wilderness that still resists us. A reminder that not all creatures must be found to be real. And if you find yourself alone in those high places, wind biting at your face, and you hear footsteps behind you that don't match your own, you may not be alone, you may be close. Close enough to see the shape in the snow, close enough to wonder if you've been watched all along, close enough to know that some legends are carved, not in ink or stone, but in ice and silence. While some legends roam the earth in icy footprints, others dominate the skies with wings so vast they blot out the sun. They say that when the skies darken without warning and thunder crashes like war drums across the horizon, it isn't just a storm, it's the beating of enormous wings. A shadow passes over the land, vast and silent, blotting out the sun for just a moment. Then lightning splits the sky, and the wind howls with a voice older than memory. This is no ordinary tempest, it is the sign of a being that has soared through legend for centuries. This is the Thunderbird. To many indigenous peoples of North America, especially those of the Pacific Northwest, the Great Plains, and the Great Lakes region, the Thunderbird is not merely a myth, it is a foundational part of their cosmology, culture, and identity. Descriptions vary from tribe to tribe, but the core idea remains powerful and consistent. The Thunderbird is a supernatural being of immense strength, guardian of the skies, and bringer of both destruction and renewal. Among the Kwakwaka'wakw and the Haida of the Pacific Northwest, the Thunderbird is a sky spirit, a massive bird so large that its wings create thunder as they flap. Lightning, some say, flashes from its eyes, and thunder rolls with every beat of its wings. In some stories, the Thunderbird carries enormous whales into the sky and devours them whole. It is a creature of awe and reverence, symbolizing not only raw power but balance. It destroys, but also protects. It is often depicted in totem poles and ceremonial art, always with outstretched wings, curved beak, and wide, alert eyes. Further inland, the Lakota, Ojibwe, Menominee, and other tribes also revere the Thunderbird. Among the Menominee, the Thunderbird lives on a great mountain that floats in the sky. It comes down to punish wrongdoers and fight evil spirits, especially the dreaded underwater panthers, chaotic, malevolent beings of the deep. To the Lakota, the Thunderbird is part of the Wakantanka, the Great Mystery, and exists in a pantheon of spiritual forces that shape the universe. What makes the Thunderbird especially fascinating is how it blurs the line between animal and God. It is not just a bird made large, it is a force of nature, intelligent and purposeful. In some traditions, it can take on human form. In others, it is seen as a kind of weather deity, controlling storms, rains, and the seasons themselves. It punishes the proud and protects the virtuous. It's not uncommon to find tales of Thunderbirds intervening in human affairs, sometimes as messengers, sometimes as punishers, sometimes as saviors. But what gave rise to this creature in the first place? Some believe the Thunderbird legend may have originated from ancient sightings of massive prehistoric birds, or even misidentified fossils. Creatures like the Argentavis, a now extinct bird with a wingspan over 20 feet, or pterosaurs, whose remains have been found across the Americas, may have seeded the idea of birds too large and strange to be ordinary. Others point to natural phenomena like powerful storms, with thunder and lightning inspiring tales of a being mighty enough to create them. Interestingly, Thunderbird-like creatures exist in other parts of the world too, albeit under different names. In Mesoamerican mythology, there's the Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god, who controls wind and rain. In Norse mythology, Thor's chariot is pulled by goats whose hooves create thunder. Across the globe, cultures seem to have reached for bird-like beings to explain the sky's fury, a universal reflection of humanity's awe of nature. Yet even with these similarities, the Thunderbird remains uniquely North American in its cultural role. Unlike creatures that are feared or demonized, the Thunderbird is complex, sometimes wrathful, but never evil. It is a protector, a being that ensures moral order. Some native legends suggest that the Thunderbird was sent by the Creator to watch over humanity, to remind them of the sacred, to deliver justice when needed. It is both terrifying and holy, In ceremonies and dances, the Thunderbird is often invoked or symbolized. Regalia, with feathered wings, drumming that mimics thunder, and masks with wide beaked mouths are used to channel its spirit. It remains a living part of tradition in many indigenous communities. Elders still speak of it with reverence, and to see a massive bird soaring in the sky, even an eagle or a condor, is to be reminded of the Thunderbird's enduring presence. Modern sightings, of course, add fuel to the fire. Throughout the 20th and even 21st century, people from remote towns in Alaska, Pennsylvania, and Illinois have reported seeing giant birds with wingspans far larger than any known species. In 1977, a famous account came from Lawndale, Illinois, where a group of children claimed that a huge bird swooped down and tried to carry one of them away. Though the child escaped, the story made national headlines and reignited interest in the Thunderbird legend. Cryptozoologists have long speculated about the existence of such birds, sometimes linking them to surviving prehistoric species. The Rock of Arabic folklore, the Garuda of Hindu and Buddhist tradition, all are brought into conversation. But for native communities, the Thunderbird doesn't require proof. It doesn't need to be found in a forest or photographed in the sky. It exists as surely as the wind and rain. This divergence between modern interpretation and traditional belief is worth noting. Pop culture, as it often does, has picked up the Thunderbird myth and run with it. You'll find it in comic books, video games, and television shows, often portrayed as a flashy monster or a winged superhero. And while these representations help keep the legend alive in the broader public imagination, they often strip away its cultural depth. To truly understand the Thunderbird, one must see it not just as a mythical creature, but as a symbol of nature's might, of moral reckoning, of the bridge between the physical and the spiritual. So how is the Thunderbird remembered today? For many indigenous peoples, it remains a sacred being. Its image is painted on drums, carved into totems, and told in stories around the fire. It is a symbol of pride, of ancestry, of survival. For outsiders, it's a myth that sparks the imagination, a reminder that the world still holds mysteries, and that not all legends are meant to be dissected or proven. The Thunderbird endures because it speaks to something primal, the awe we feel when faced with forces beyond our control, the sense that nature is alive, aware, and sometimes watching. Whether as stormbringer, protector, or celestial judge, the Thunderbird reminds us of our place in the universe, not as masters, but as part of a greater, older, and infinitely more mysterious world. And so, the next time the sky darkens unexpectedly, and thunder rumbles across the hills with no warning, think of the Thunderbird. Not as a storybook creature or a relic of folklore, but as something still very much alive in the hearts and traditions of the people who have known it for generations. Something that flies just beyond the clouds, between the storm and the silence. Not all that flies is divine. Some legends descend not from the clouds, but from the shadows of winter nights, bearing punishment instead of power. In the snow-blanketed villages of the Austrian Alps, where pine trees groan under the weight of winter and ancient bells echo through the mountain passes, there is a name that stirs dread among children and unease in their elders. It is whispered in the hush of December nights, when the stars are sharp above and the hearth burns low. It is not the name of Saint Nicholas that they fear, but his dark companion, the horned shadow who walks behind him. This is the tale of Krampus, the Yuletide demon of the Old World. Krampus is a figure of Alpine folklore, particularly prevalent in Austria, Germany, and other Central European countries. Emerging from the murky confluence of pagan tradition and Christian morality, Krampus is the antithesis of the jolly, gift-giving saint. Where Saint Nicholas rewards the virtuous, Krampus punishes the wicked. He is a creature not of redemption, but of retribution. Described as a monstrous blend of man and beast, Krampus is said to be tall and hunched, with a body cloaked in thick black or brown fur. His face is a grotesque mask of malice, featuring glowing eyes, a forked tongue that snakes from his mouth, and fangs that drip with menace. Towering goat horns curl from his skull, and heavy chains clank around his body, a symbolic binding of his ancient pagan roots to the Christian era. In one hand, he carries bundles of birch rods, known as rootin, used to swat naughty children. In the other, a sack or wicker basket meant to haul the worst offenders away, some say to be eaten, others to be drowned or dragged to the underworld. The origins of Krampus are ancient, far predating Christianity. Scholars believe he may have descended from Norse and Germanic traditions, possibly linked to satyr-like woodland spirits or household demons that punished misbehavior. With the spread of Christianity, rather than erasing these older beliefs, the Church assimilated them. Krampus was tethered to the figure of Saint Nicholas, his brutality a counterbalance to the saint's benevolence. The result was a powerful dichotomy, reward and punishment, heaven and hell, light and shadow. Krampus makes his dreaded appearance each year on the night of December 5th, known as Krampusnacht, Krampus Night. While St. Nicholas visits homes to leave gifts and sweets in the shoes of well-behaved children, Krampus stalks the snowy streets in search of those who have sinned. The night is marked by processions known as Krampuslauf, or Krampus runs, during which men dressed as the creature march through towns, rattling chains and bellowing like beasts. Some lash spectators with birch sticks, while others chase them through alleys and squares. It is a night of chaos and catharsis, where fear becomes festivity. In older times, parents would leave windows open or hearths unguarded, allowing Krampus to slip into the home. Children would wake trembling, hoping to find sweets in their shoes, but fearing they might find coal, or worse, be spirited away. It was not uncommon for families to tell tales of children taken and never returned, replaced only by claw marks or hoofprints in the snow. These stories served a purpose beyond entertainment. They were cautionary tales to enforce discipline and obedience. The symbolism of Krampus is multi-layered. His bestial form and fiery temperament reflect primal fear, the fear of the dark, of judgment, of losing favor in the eyes of parents or God. His horns and chains speak to ancient demonic iconography, but also to the binding of chaos within a structured moral framework. To see Krampus is to face one's misdeeds, to be reminded that actions have consequences, especially when the year turns cold and the world turns inward. There are regional variations in Krampus lore, each adding their own twists. In some versions, he is not alone but travels with other dark spirits, the Pershtin, who come in both beautiful and hideous forms, symbolizing fortune and misfortune. In others, Krampus carries bells to herald his approach, the sound growing louder as he nears his prey. Some say he keeps a list darker than St. Nicholas's, one etched with the names of children doomed to disappear. One of the most enduring stories tells of a boy named Lucas, who lived in a remote alpine village. He was known for his cruelty, bullying his peers, stealing from neighbors and lying without remorse. His parents, ashamed and afraid, pleaded with him to change, especially as Krampusnacht approached. But Lucas laughed at their warnings, mocking the villagers and even setting fire to a Krampus effigy prepared for the festival. That night, as the winds howled and the moon vanished behind clouds, Lucas awoke to a deep, metallic clanking. He sat up in bed and saw a shadow move across the wall, horns casting crooked shapes in the flickering light. The air grew cold, and the scent of soot and wet fur filled the room. Then he saw him, Krampus, hunched and snarling, filling the doorway with his massive frame. Before Lucas could scream, he was snatched from his bed, shoved into a wicker basket, and carried into the storm. The next morning, his bed was empty. The only sign of his departure were claw marks on the windowsill, and a trail of scorched footprints leading into the woods. The villagers spoke of it in hushed tones, adding Lucas's name to the long memory of Krampusnacht. Whether he was devoured, drowned, or transformed into one of Krampus's minions, no one knows. But every year since, the fire for the effigy burns hotter, and the children of the village behave a little better as winter draws near. Despite his terrifying nature, Krampus has seen a revival in recent decades. Once suppressed by the Catholic Church, and even banned in certain areas during the 20th century for being too demonic, Krampus has re-emerged as both a cultural celebration and a dark mirror to the sanitized Christmas narrative. Modern Krampuslauf events now draw tourists and thrill-seekers, while his image graces holiday cards, merchandise, and even horror films. The demon has become an icon, not of evil, but of balance. In this light, Krampus can be seen as a reminder of forgotten truths. That winter, while festive, is also a time of reckoning. That joy is sweeter when earned, and that in the heart of every tradition, no matter how warm, there lies a shadow, a necessary counterpart that gives shape to the light. So if you find yourself in the Alps in early December, listen closely. If you hear bells in the distance and the sound of hooves crunching through the snow, it may be too late to make amends. Draw your curtains tight, tend your fire well, and hope that your name is not written in Krampus's dark ledger. For when the cold wind howls and the night grows long, the demon of December walks again, and he does not forget. While some spirits punish the wicked during winter's chill, others dwell in fire and air, whispering temptations and truths from realms unseen. In the desolate reaches of the Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter of the Arabian Peninsula, where the sands shift like waves and the sun bleaches the bones of the unwary, there are whispers that never truly fade. Long after the wind dies down and the fire burns low, they linger in the air, murmurs in a language too old for memory. Nomads speak of them with lowered voices and cautious eyes, never daring to summon their names too easily. They are the unseen watchers, the fire-born shadows that dwell in the spaces between worlds. This is the legend of the Jinn, ancient spirits born of smokeless flame. The Jinn are not monsters in the traditional sense. They are not demons, not quite gods, not ghosts or mere superstitions. In the folklore of the Middle East and North Africa, they are something entirely different, an entire race of beings, older than the oldest stories, created by Allah from smokeless fire, long before humanity was shaped from clay. Invisible to the human eye, yet fully sentient, Jinn inhabit a realm parallel to ours, one that overlaps with our world, but remains just beyond the veil of perception. And though they live unseen, their presence is felt, sometimes with blessings, more often with curses. The stories of the Jinn are as ancient as the desert itself. They are said to dwell in remote wild places, wind-swept mountains, abandoned ruins, dark caves, and forgotten wells. These are their favored haunts, but they can also live among us, hidden in plain sight, adopting forms that mimic our own, or taking on animal shapes, snakes, black dogs, cats, or birds. They are shapeshifters and tricksters, bound by laws very different from those of man. The nature of the Jinn is as varied as that of humans. Some are benevolent, wise, and even helpful to mortals. Others are capricious, jealous, or cruel, delighting in tormenting those who cross their path. There are tales of Jinn who fall in love with humans, protecting them fiercely. And there are darker stories of possession, madness, and inexplicable misfortune, all blamed on unseen Jinn with motives no one can fathom. The Jinn have their own societies, their own cities, even their own religions. Some believe, some do not. They have kings and queens, clans and blood feuds. In ancient pre-Islamic times, tribes would call upon them for prophecy or vengeance, leaving offerings in the desert or reciting incantations to summon their favor. But the favor of a Jinn is a dangerous thing. It always comes with a price. One of the most enduring beliefs is that Jinn can possess a human being, entering through vulnerable moments, sorrow, rage, fear, and taking root inside the mind. The possessed are said to speak in strange tongues, display knowledge they could not possibly have known, or move with unnatural strength. Religious healers and exorcists still perform rituals to expel such spirits, reciting verses from the Quran and anointing the afflicted with blessed oils. The Jinn, being believers or disbelievers themselves, are said to respond to these holy words, some fleeing, others growing violent. Perhaps the most famous story involving the Jinn is that of King Solomon, Suleiman, as he is known in Islamic tradition. It is said that he was granted a ring by God that allowed him to command the Jinn, binding them to his will. With their power, he built great temples and cities, employing them as laborers, soldiers, and spies. The Jinn, in this version of the tale, are both feared and enslaved, creatures of immense power, yet subject to divine order. But not all Jinn can be controlled. Among them, there are ancient and powerful beings whose names are feared even by their own kind. The Ifrit, for instance, massive fiery entities known for their strength and malice, or the Marid mighty Jinn of the sea, proud and slow to anger, but capable of great destruction when provoked. These high-ranking Jinn are rarely seen in stories of human interaction, but when they appear, entire cities tremble. And then there are the stories passed down from desert travelers, stories that carry the grainy texture of sand and truth. A caravan lost in a sandstorm stumbles upon a strange city, gleaming towers of brass rising from the dunes, only for it to vanish by morning, leaving no trace but a few scattered footprints. A solitary traveler hears a voice calling his name at night, mimicking the tone of a loved one who is hundreds of miles away. Or a merchant, wealthy beyond reason, suddenly finds his fortune turned to ash after angering something that lived in the well behind his home. There are rules, of course, unspoken codes meant to protect against such encounters. Never pour boiling water on the ground without first uttering a warning, for a Jinn might be there unseen. Avoid singing or whistling after dark, it may draw their attention. And if you find something glittering in the sand, especially gold or jewelry, leave it where it lies. Some Jinn are bound to objects, imprisoned by ancient magic, and to disturb their prison is to invite their wrath. Despite their power and mystery, Jinn are not immortal. They live far longer than humans. Some say thousands of years, but they are born, and they can die. Their emotions are deep and volatile, and they are prone to pride and vengeance. This makes them dangerous allies and worse enemies. Yet there are those who seek to bargain with them still, sorcerers, alchemists, and seekers of forbidden knowledge. These people are said to summon Jinn in secret rituals, offering incense, blood, or ancient words passed down in grimoires, inked in strange symbols. The deals made in such circles are rarely clean, and more often than not, the Jinn walks away with the better end. In modern times, the stories have not disappeared. In rural villages across the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia, belief in Jinn remains deeply rooted. Children are warned not to wander alone near certain groves or abandoned homes. Families consult religious scholars to deal with unexplained illnesses or sudden streaks of misfortune. And in cities, where neon lights have replaced campfires, tales of Jinn still ripple through alleyways and cafes. Stories of strange dreams, flickering lights, and presences felt but never seen. Psychologists have tried to explain the phenomenon, labeling it mass hysteria, sleep paralysis, cultural memory, but to those who have seen, heard, or felt the Jinn, no explanation is necessary. They do not question, they remember, and they stay careful. There is something enduring about the legend of the Jinn, something that speaks to the human need to understand the unseen, to name the forces that shape our fate. They are beings of smoke and fire, yes, but also of story, of mystery, of the wild and ungoverned spaces in our world and within ourselves. They are the echoes in empty rooms, the chill in the air just before dusk, the flicker at the corner of the eye that disappears when you turn your head. And so, the Jinn remain. Not in dusty books or forgotten scrolls, but in the living breath of myth, at the edge of campfires in the desert, in the hush of nighttime alleys, in the solemn prayers whispered when something feels not quite right. They walk between our world and their own, sometimes watching, sometimes interfering, always just beyond reach. If you ever find yourself in the deep desert or near the ruins of a forgotten village, and you hear a voice call your name where no voice should be, do not answer, do not look. Walk quickly, respectfully, and never alone, for in the world of fire and shadow, the Jinn still listen, and they do not forget. From the scorching deserts where ancient spirits dance in smoke, we journey now to the shadowy waters of distant wetlands, where something far older is said to stir. In the deep heart of the Australian bush, where the rivers run slow and the swamps breathe mist into the dawn, there is a sound that few dare to follow. A splash, maybe, a low growl, or something stranger, a cry that doesn't belong to any creature known to man. They say, if you hear it, turn back, because something is watching, something old, something that doesn't want to be found. This is the domain of the Bunyip. The Bunyip is one of the most elusive and terrifying creatures in Aboriginal Australian mythology. It is said to dwell in billabongs, creeks, riverbeds, and swamps across the continent, and though descriptions vary from region to region, one detail remains consistent. It is dangerous, unpredictable, and not of this world. The word Bunyip comes from the Wemba Wemba, Wurwurgaya language, roughly translating to devil or evil spirit, and the stories surrounding it have sent chills down spines for generations. Descriptions of the Bunyip vary wildly, a testament to its mythic status. Some tales describe it as having the face of a dog, the body of a seal, flippers, and a monstrous roar. Others say it resembles a giant starfish or a crocodile with a shaggy mane and tusks. In the 19th century, European settlers began documenting sightings of strange creatures in Australia's wetlands, often claiming they had encountered the Bunyip. Some even submitted bones and skulls to museums, certain they had found proof of the legend. The problem: none of the remains matched any known animal, nor did they match each other. But long before colonists arrived, Aboriginal communities knew of the Bunyip. They didn't see it as a mere monster. It was a spiritual force, sometimes protector, sometimes punisher. In some traditions it was said the Bunyip punished those who broke sacred laws, polluted the water, or entered forbidden areas. It was a guardian of the land, a being deeply tied to the Dreamtime, the Aboriginal spiritual worldview that connects people, animals, and the land through ancestral stories. Notably, the meaning and portrayal of the Bunyip varies greatly between different Aboriginal nations. To some, it is a cautionary tale for children. To others, a sacred presence that ensures balance within its watery domain. Many stories describe the Bunyip as nocturnal, emerging from the water under the cover of night to stalk prey. It was said to eat fish, crustaceans, and on occasion, human beings. Some tales depict it as mindless and bloodthirsty, but others portray it as intelligent and watchful, choosing when to strike. The unpredictability is part of what makes it so terrifying. In places where the Bunyip was said to dwell, locals would avoid the water's edge. Children were warned not to play near creeks alone, not out of superstition, but out of deep cultural knowledge that these waters held secrets. And then there are the sightings. In the 1800s, stories of Bunyip encounters swept through rural Australia. Newspapers published lurid accounts of monstrous shapes in the water. One of the most famous incidents occurred near the Murrumbidgee River, where settlers claimed to have heard unearthly bellows echoing across the night, and found enormous, clawed footprints pressed into the muddy banks. In 1847, a skull was found near the town of Geelong that some claimed belonged to the Bunyip. It was displayed in a local museum, drawing huge crowds. Aboriginal elders reportedly confirmed that it matched the creature of their stories. The skull has since vanished, its mystery unsolved. Some modern researchers have tried to rationalize the Bunyip. They suggest that Aboriginal stories may be distant echoes of now extinct megafauna, like the Diprotodon, a massive wombat-like herbivore that lived tens of thousands of years ago. Perhaps ancient humans encountered these creatures, and their memory passed down through generations, eventually evolving into legend. The fossilized bones of these animals have been discovered in the same regions where Bunyip legends are strongest, lending some weight to this theory. Others argue the Bunyip is a product of natural dangers. Australia is home to deadly snakes, crocodiles, and eerie sounds that echo strangely in the wetlands. Could the Bunyip be a cultural personification of fear, a warning not to take nature lightly? There's also the possibility that the Bunyip represents more than just physical danger. Some anthropologists interpret the Bunyip as a symbolic creature, a guardian of sacred waterholes, and a reminder that trespassing into certain natural spaces, without understanding or respect, can have consequences. The creature may serve as a metaphor for moral and environmental boundaries, a spiritual manifestation of land and water rights in indigenous law. And yet, the legend persists. People still report strange sights in the wild, ripples in still water, shapes under the surface, animal calls that don't match any known species. Some even claim that the Bunyip has followed them, its eyes glowing faintly in the bush just beyond the campfire. To the people who live close to these landscapes, the Bunyip is more than myth. It is a force, a presence, something that reminds them of the power and mystery of the natural world. The creature serves as both a story and a boundary, a living narrative that links the past to the present, the physical world to the spiritual. In Aboriginal tradition, stories are not just entertainment, they are maps, moral codes, histories, and warnings. The Bunyip reminds us that there are places we do not understand, that the land holds memories deeper than science can uncover, that sometimes monsters are not meant to be studied or explained, they are meant to be respected. Today, the Bunyip appears in books, comics, and video games, often transformed into a fantastical beast of horror. But in doing so, we risk losing the layers of meaning it holds. The real Bunyip is not a one-size-fits-all monster. It is a shapeshifter, a mirror of cultural fears, a guardian of sacred places. Its story cannot be confined to a single form or told by a single voice. What we do know is this: the Bunyip legend has endured for centuries, evolving with each telling but never vanishing. It remains hidden in the reeds, just beneath the surface, watching, waiting, a shadow in the water, a whisper in the trees. And whether it's real or not may be the wrong question to ask, because the real power of the Bunyip isn't whether it exists, it's what it makes us feel. That primal, unshakable sense that we are not alone, that the land remembers, that there are forces older than we can name, and wilder than we can tame. And if you ever find yourself by a quiet billabong, with the wind rustling through the grass and the water still as glass, listen closely. The Bunyip may be near. From the shadowy waters of the Australian wilds, we shift to the quiet outskirts of New Jersey, where a different kind of legend has stirred fear for generations. In the heart of southern New Jersey lies the Pine Barrens, a vast expanse of dense forests, winding rivers, and sprawling marshlands. This secluded region, with its sandy soil and labyrinthine trails, has long been shrouded in mystery and intrigue. Among the many tales whispered through the pines, none is as enduring or as chilling as that of the Jersey Devil, a creature said to haunt these woods for nearly 3 centuries. The origins of the Jersey Devil trace back to the early 18th century, to a woman named Deborah Leeds. Residing in the secluded area known as Leeds Point, Deborah was the mother of 12 children. Upon discovering she was pregnant with her 13th, she is said to have exclaimed in frustration, "Let this one be a devil." On a stormy night in 1735, amidst howling winds and flickering candlelight, she gave birth. The child, initially appearing normal, transformed before the family's eyes into a grotesque creature. It sprouted leathery wings, a horse-like head, cloven hooves, and a forked tail. With a blood-curdling screech, it attacked its mother and those nearby before escaping up the chimney and vanishing into the darkness of the Pine Barrens. Descriptions of the Jersey Devil have varied over the years, but common elements persist. Witnesses often describe a winged biped with hooves, standing upright yet capable of flight. Its piercing screams are said to echo through the forests, sending shivers down the spines of those who hear them. The creature's grotesque hybrid form, a patchwork of animal traits, neither entirely beast nor wholly unnatural, has become symbolic of something deeper. In folklore, such hybrids often reflect anxieties about the unnatural, the profane, and the breaking of order. To early settlers, it may have been the embodiment of wilderness itself, unpredictable, unknowable, and hostile to human taming. The Pine Barrens, with its unique ecology and sparse population, provides a fitting backdrop for such a legend. Covering over 1 million acres across 7 counties, this dense forest has remained largely undeveloped due to its sandy, acidic soil, which is unsuitable for farming. The land's barrenness discouraged large-scale settlement, and over time, the people who lived there, known colloquially as Pineys, were viewed as strange or reclusive. Isolated from mainstream society, they became fertile ground for superstition and oral tradition. Within this region, the Jersey Devil became more than a creature, it became an explanation. When livestock died, when children disappeared, when screams echoed through the trees, the answer was often whispered: the devil walks tonight. While the legend's roots are steeped in folklore, some historians suggest alternative origins. Dr. Brian Regal, an associate professor at Keon University, posits that the tale may have stemmed from political and religious disputes among early New Jersey settlers. The Leeds family, for whom Leeds Point is named, were prominent figures in colonial South Jersey. Daniel Leeds, a Quaker turned Anglican, was a controversial figure due to his writings, which included astrological symbols and occult references, deeply frowned upon by his Quaker peers. Branded as heretical, Leeds' reputation suffered, and his opponents began to associate his name with dark forces. His son, Titan Leeds, inherited both the family name and its notoriety. In a strange twist of history, Titan became the subject of mockery by none other than Benjamin Franklin, who in a satirical jab predicted his death in print, and later claimed that the posthumous publications were ghost-written by Titan's spirit. It was in this social and political climate that the term Leeds Devil emerged, a label meant to tarnish the family's legacy. Over time, through the lens of folklore and fear, the Leeds Devil evolved into something more monstrous, a winged beast of the woods. The transformation from man to myth reveals how rumors, political smear, and religious judgment can birth an enduring legend. Throughout the centuries, numerous sightings of the Jersey Devil have been reported. In the early 1900s, a week-long surge of alleged encounters, now referred to as Phenomenal Week, sparked mass hysteria. From Camden to Philadelphia, residents claimed to see the beast gliding through the skies or lurking in the woods. Newspapers published terrifying eyewitness accounts, livestock were found mutilated, and schools closed in fear. Armed pauses roamed the Pine Barrens in search of the monster. Yet despite the frenzy, no definitive proof ever surfaced. Still, the damage was done. The Jersey Devil had taken root in the public imagination as a genuine threat. This moment marked the creature's ascent into the realm of American cryptids, joining the ranks of Bigfoot, Mothman, and the Chupacabra. Unlike its mythic European counterparts, the Jersey Devil was born on American soil, shaped by colonial fears, religious strife, and wild landscapes. It became a kind of cultural barometer, a creature that re-emerges in times of anxiety, particularly when the boundary between the civilized and the untamed feels especially thin. The cultural impact of the Jersey Devil is undeniable. It has inspired books, television shows, and even serves as the namesake for New Jersey's NHL team, the New Jersey Devils. It's appeared in the X-Files, Scooby-Doo, and video games like Fallout 76, where it continues to haunt players in digital forests. Festivals and tours dedicated to the legend draw both skeptics and believers, eager to delve into the mystery. The creature's image adorns merchandise, and its story is recounted in classrooms and around campfires alike. For many, it's a regional mascot, an icon of New Jersey's eccentric history. And yet, beyond the pop culture and spectacle lies a more intimate story, a reminder of how myths are born. The tale of the Jersey Devil is a unique fusion of folklore, political satire, colonial conflict, and environmental fear. It's not merely a scary story, but a reflection of how early Americans processed their world, a new, unfamiliar landscape full of danger, populated by people with strange beliefs, and governed by forces they didn't yet understand. In modern times, the legend persists, with occasional reports of sightings and unexplained phenomena in the Pine Barrens. While skeptics attribute these accounts to misidentified animals, atmospheric illusions, or the power of suggestion, the allure of the Jersey Devil endures. It serves as a symbol of the unknown, a reminder of the mysteries that lurk in the shadows of our world, and perhaps even within ourselves. The tale of the Jersey Devil encapsulates the rich tapestry of folklore, history, and culture that defines New Jersey. Whether viewed as a cautionary tale, a political allegory, or a genuine cryptid, the legend continues to captivate and intrigue. As long as the Pine Barrens stand, the story of the Jersey Devil will echo through its trees, a testament to the enduring power of myth, the fragility of truth, and the human fascination with the unexplained. From the dark legends of the American Northeast, we cross oceans and centuries to a land where beauty and terror weave together in silk threads. In the mist-wrapped forests of Japan, where the bamboo groves whisper with ancient secrets and temple bells echo softly through the valleys, there is a tale that has survived for centuries. A tale of beauty, danger, and deadly deception. It tells of a creature who appears as a woman of enchanting grace, elegant, soft-spoken, impossibly alluring, but who hides a monstrous truth beneath her silken skin. This is the legend of the Jorgumo, the binding bride, the spider woman of the mountains. Jorgumo is a yukai, a spirit or demon from Japanese folklore, born from both nature and nightmare. In Japanese mythology, yukai are not simply monsters, they are supernatural beings that exist in the spaces between worlds, often tied to natural elements or deep emotional truths. Jorgumo, whose name literally means binding bride or horse spider, is said to be a monstrous spider who gains the power to shapeshift into a beautiful woman after living for hundreds of years. From her lair, she spins webs not only of silk, but of illusion, desire, and doom. The origins of the legend can be traced back to the Edo period, a time when Japan was at peace but rigidly structured. women were expected to be subservient, modest, and obedient. Within this context, Jorgumo took on symbolic weight, embodying male fears of female sexuality, independence, and hidden strength. Unlike the nurturing mother or the loyal wife, she was beautiful, assertive, and deadly. Her very existence was a rebellion against societal norms. Wrapped in silk and shadow, Jorgumo is said to dwell in remote, dangerous places, most famously at Jorgum Falls in the Izu Peninsula. This real-world location, with its cascading water and mossy stones, is more than just a scenic backdrop. It is the heart of her legend. Tourists can visit the waterfall today, where a statue commemorates the myth. The tale says that travelers and woodsmen would hear soft music coming from the forest near the falls. Drawn by the sound of a biwa, or the gentle hum of a woman singing, they would follow the melody deeper into the woods, where a beautiful woman would appear, seemingly alone and in need of help. What those poor souls did not realize was that this woman was the Jorgumo in disguise. As they approached, entranced by her beauty, they became ensnared, literally and figuratively. Her voice, her gaze, her every movement served to disarm and seduce. Only when it was far too late would they see the glint of 8 eyes, the shimmer of fangs hidden behind ruby lips. She would then reveal her true form, the lower half of her body, that of a giant, venomous spider, with long bristling legs and a bulbous abdomen covered in iridescent silk. By then, her victims were already tangled in her webs, paralyzed by poison or fear. It's said that she fed not just on the flesh of men, but on their life force, their memories, their very souls. Their bones would sometimes be found near the base of the waterfall, picked clean and gleaming white, wrapped in strands of golden silk. Other times, they were never found at all, their names whispered only in mourning by those who warned others not to wander too far from the path. But Jorgumo was not a mindless predator. In some versions of the legend, she was capable of love, or something close to it. There are stories of her falling for a young man, visiting him in secret, and lavishing him with gifts. When he grew ill from her poison, she wept for him and begged a monk to save his life. The monk, realizing what she was, performed sacred chants to drive her away. It's unclear whether she left out of sorrow or anger, but the young man never saw her again. Some say he recovered, only to wander the forests in a daze, forever haunted by dreams of silk and sorrow. The presence of the monk in this story reflects a common theme in Japanese folklore: the power of spiritual purity over chaotic supernatural forces. Buddhist monks often serve as protectors in these tales, those who can pierce through illusions and banish yokai with sacred chants and sutras. In this way, they embody the balance between the seen and unseen worlds, acting as a check against forces like Jorgumo. Spiders themselves hold layered symbolism in Japanese culture. They are seen as cunning, patient hunters, often representing trickery or fate. The specific spider from which Jorgumo is believed to evolve, the golden orb weaver, is a real species known for its beautiful and incredibly strong silk. Its golden threads gleam in the sun, much like the lure of the Jorgumo herself, radiant, mesmerizing, and ultimately deadly. Jorgumo's story carries multiple meanings, depending on who tells it. To some, she is a warning against the dangers of temptation, of following beauty into the dark. To others, she is a tragic figure, a creature bound by her nature, seeking love in a world that only fears her. She exists in a moral gray area, neither wholly evil nor entirely sympathetic. Like many yokai, she defies easy categorization. Her legend endures because she is so many things at once: woman and spider, lover and killer, spirit and flesh. Modern interpretations of Jorgumo have only added to her mystique. She has appeared in anime, video games, horror films, and literature. Sometimes she is portrayed as a monstrous villain, other times as a seductive anti-heroine. Artists and writers are drawn to her duality, her ability to be both breathtakingly beautiful and utterly terrifying. In a world increasingly fascinated by complex characters, Jorgumo has found a new audience, and yet the old warnings still hold. There are villages in Japan where elders still speak of her with reverence and fear. They say the forest near Jorgone Falls is quieter than it should be, that the birds do not sing there, and that if you hear music from the trees, you should turn and walk the other way. Some leave offerings, coins, flowers, bits of silk at the edge of the forest, just in case, just to be safe. The story of Jorgumo is more than a ghost tale. It is a mirror held up to society, to our fears of the unknown, our unease with power that cannot be controlled or explained. She reminds us that not all monsters are mindless, that sometimes they are born from pain, from misunderstanding, from centuries of solitude. And perhaps in the dark corners of the world, they still wait, not for vengeance, but for someone who might understand. So if you ever find yourself alone near a waterfall in the forests of Japan, and you hear music floating on the breeze, think twice before you follow it. For beauty is not always a blessing. Sometimes it is a web, and once you're caught, there's no escape. From the misty mountains of Japan, where silk threads shimmer with hidden peril, to the sunlit valleys of southern France, where a different kind of monster once moved beneath the earth, legends have long whispered of creatures both feared and revered. In the sun-drenched hills of Provence, there once prowled a creature so fearsome, its legend rippled through the centuries. A beast of both terror and marvel, its name spoken in hushed tones and prayers of protection. This is the tale of the Tarasque, the monstrous guardian and scourge of southern France, whose story weaves together myth, faith, and the age-old tension between nature's fury and human resilience. The Tarasque is a unique figure in French folklore, originating in the region of Provence during the early Christian era, a time when ancient pagan beliefs still lingered in the hills, and Christianity was slowly shaping the cultural landscape. Unlike many other legendary monsters, whose stories are steeped in pure myth, the Tarasque straddles the line between folklore and religious hagiography. Its tale is inseparable from that of Saint Martha, a figure revered in Christian tradition, whose encounter with the beast became a cornerstone of local belief and identity. First chronicled in medieval texts, the legend of the Tarasque has since become a cultural emblem of Tarascon, the town that still bears its name, a place where myth, faith, and memory intertwine. Descriptions of the Tarasque vary slightly across sources, but all paint a picture of a creature unlike any other. It was said to be a hybrid beast, part dragon, part lion, part bear, and part fish. Its body was massive and covered in an impenetrable turtle-like shell, with 6 short, powerful legs and claws that could tear through armor. Its maw was wide, its breath searing, and its eyes glowed with a malevolent light. From its mouth issued poisonous smoke, and its tail, often described as serpentine, could crush trees and men alike. It moved with surprising speed for a creature of its size, leaving scorched earth and broken bodies in its wake. But the Tarasque was more than a nightmare made flesh. In its grotesque, multi-beast form, fusing elements of land and sea, predator and myth, it represented something primal and chaotic, a personification of nature's wildest instincts and the mysteries that still clung to the forests, rivers, and hillsides. In a time when the wilderness was still largely unknown and deadly, the Tarasque gave shape to that fear. It was a monster of the liminal world, a creature from the borderlands where civilization met untamed earth. Its reign of terror began near the Rhone River, where it emerged from its lair to devour livestock, destroy homes, and feast on hapless travelers. Villagers lived in constant fear, their lives punctuated by sudden disappearances and whispered warnings. Attempts to kill the beast were futile, arrows shattered against its hide, and swords broke on its scales. Even the bravest knights fell before its wrath, their bones left to bleach under the Provençal. What makes the Tarasque especially intriguing is the way its story intersects with the arrival of Saint Martha of Bethany, a woman of the New Testament, sister to Mary and Lazarus, and witness to Christ's miracles. After Christ's resurrection, according to tradition, Martha journeyed by sea with other disciples to spread the new faith in Gaul, landing in the region of Provence. Her path brought her to the afflicted town of Lurk, where the Tarasque held sway. Upon hearing of the creature's devastation, Martha resolved to confront it, not with sword or spear, but with prayer and divine faith. Unlike the warriors who had tried and failed to slay the beast, Martha approached the Tarasque with calm resolve. It is said that she found the monster in the forested banks of the Rhone, and subdued it not through violence, but by showing it a crucifix and singing hymns. The creature, bewitched by her grace and the power of her faith, became docile, its rage quelled by something it could not understand. Martha tied her sash around its neck like a leash and led it peacefully back to the town. But the people of Lurk, upon seeing the dreaded beast, did not recognize its transformation. Terrified, they attacked it with stones and weapons, killing it before Martha could stop them. The saint mourned not only the suffering it had caused, but also the tragic end it met at the hands of fearful humans. In memory of this event, the town was renamed Tarascon, and a festival was later established to commemorate the legend. This story, preserved across centuries in manuscript, oral tradition, and celebration, is more than a tale of heroism. Beneath its religious veneer, the story of the Tarasque reflects deeper themes that resonate across cultures. It embodies the archetype of the tamed beast, an entity of chaos and destruction, brought to heel by purity, wisdom, or faith. The tale suggests that not all monsters are irredeemable. Some are victims of fear, rage, or circumstance. Through Martha's intervention, the Tarasque becomes a symbol of potential transformation, a narrative echo of light emerging from darkness. It is a distinctly Christian transformation of an older, likely pagan fear. Scholars and folklorists have long debated the origins of the Tarasque. Some theories suggest it may be linked to pre-Christian nature spirits or chthonic deities, subdued as Christianity spread across the Roman Empire's frontier. Others see echoes of Mesopotamian or Mediterranean hybrid beasts like the Babylonian Mushusu or the Greek Chimera. The melding of local myth with religious allegory allowed the legend to evolve with the times, mirroring the cultural shift from polytheism to monotheism, from wild nature to divine order. Even the etymology of the name hints at older roots. Tarasque likely evolved from Tarascon, the name given to the town after the beast's death, but it may also share origins with older linguistic traditions, possibly tied to ancient names for sea monsters or elemental forces. Importantly, the legend of the Tarasque also challenges traditional gender roles in myth. Saint Martha, unlike the male warriors of typical dragon-slaying epics like Saint George or Saint Michael, triumphs not through strength or violence, but through empathy and spiritual authority. She embodies a different form of power. Restraint instead of aggression, humility instead of conquest. Her role redefines what it means to be heroic, not to destroy what is feared, but to understand and transform it. The Tarasque's uniqueness lies in its dual existence as both feared monster and beloved mascot. Over time, its terrifying presence softened into something symbolic, even playful. Since the 15th century, the Fête de la Tarasque has taken place annually in Tarascon, first established by King René of Anjou. During the festivities, a massive effigy of the beast, often green, wide-mouthed, and carried on the shoulders of costumed townspeople, is paraded through the streets to music, dancing, and joyous laughter. Children run alongside the dragon-like figure, a creature once feared now embraced with delight. This blend of celebration and storytelling has kept the legend alive, passed from generation to generation, not just in sermons or texts, but in community and culture. The monster is no longer just a relic of fear, it is part of Tarascon's local identity, woven into festivals, school pageants, and family tales. As the effigy winds its way down cobblestone streets, it becomes clear that the story's central message endures. Even the fiercest monsters can be overcome, not through destruction, but through understanding. The Tarasque continues to appear in modern media, books, board games, video games, and tabletop adventures. With its bizarre anatomy and tragic backstory, it fits neatly into the modern imagination's love of morally ambiguous monsters. Yet despite these reinterpretations, the core of the story remains intact: a terrifying beast, a brave soul, and the possibility of peace. In a world still filled with dragons to be slain and shadows to be feared, the Tarasque offers something different. It is not a tale of conquest, but of redemption. It reminds us that the unknown may not be evil, only misunderstood, and that strength of spirit may tame what brute force never could. As the sun sets over the Rhone and the hills grow quiet, the memory of the Tarasque lingers, not just in stone carvings or old manuscripts, but in the spirit of a people who took a monster and made it their own. The earth may no longer tremble beneath its feet, but its story walks on, silent, mysterious, and eternally alive. After 3 hours exploring the dark corners of human imagination, we've journeyed through forests haunted by shapeshifters, deserts ruled by ancient demons, and rivers patrolled by beasts older than memory itself. These creatures, some terrifying, some tragic, aren't just stories meant to scare us. They're reflections of our fears, our hopes, and our attempt to explain the unexplainable. From whispered legends passed down around firelight to elaborate rituals meant to keep them at bay, each tale tells us something about the people who created it and the world they lived in. But even as the world changes and belief gives way to metaphor, these myths endure. They live on in festivals, in games, in books, and in the quiet thrill of wondering what might still be lurking out there. Whether you see them as allegories, cautionary tales, or echoes of something forgotten, one thing is certain: folklore has teeth, and it never truly dies. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into the monstrous and the mythical, make sure to like, subscribe, and keep your lanterns lit. You never know what shadows might still be listening.